Friday off to go to a course. It's pretty damn expensive.
I call the June 7th, 2018 meeting of the Board of Commissioners of Johnson City, Tennessee to order tonight. Thank you all for attending. For those who are in the chambers and for those who are watching on TV and live stream, we welcome you to our meeting. Tonight we will have an invocation from, excuse me, I've got my agenda out of place, from Pastor Dwight Jenkins from the Boone Trail Baptist Church. Pastor Jenkins, and if you would stand please and stay standing for the Pledge of Allegiance after the invocation.
Let me pray. Our Father, again, we find ourselves in the position of needing to recognize and having the privilege of being able to recognize how grateful we are to you for your provision in our lives. We thank you for this day that you have granted to us. We thank you for every breath that has been given to us. And Father, tonight we thank you as well for the privilege of being able to step in obedience to your word and pray for those who are in authority over us. Father, we pray for everything that will be done and everything that will be said here this evening. We pray, Father, please would you allow it to be informed by your word and guided by your spirit, and that things that are done would be done ultimately for your honor, for your glory, and for the good of the citizens of Johnson City. We thank you, and we praise you for this day. We ask this now in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Peterson, before we begin, I have a couple of recommendations for the commission that we make some alterations to the agenda. If we could move the Sesquicentennial Committee report before the consent agenda, move that up. And then also to move the Ordinance 4461-18, which is on de-annexation in gray, before the budget ordinance.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioners, are y'all okay with that?
Works well.
Yes. Do you need a motion, or are we just?
We don't need a motion, do we, just to rearrange the agenda? No, we're good. Okay, with that being said, Mr. Peterson, we'll turn it over to you.
Your first order of business is consideration of the minutes from the regularly scheduled meeting held on Thursday, May the 17th.
Commissioners, are there any changes to the agenda, to the minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
All right, any other discussion? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
At this time, we move into presentations, proclamations, and resolutions. The first order of business will be a presentation by U.S. Attorney Overby regarding the current Project Safe Neighborhood Initiative and our work with his office and his staff. Senator, if I could ask you to step forward, please. Certainly want to welcome former Senator, State Senator Overby to join us this evening. He has been a true friend in his role as a state senator and now as the U.S. Attorney, and it is certainly our privilege and pleasure to have you here this evening, and thanks for joining us and all your help through the years in Nashville.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson, and Vice Mayor Brock and members of the City Commission. What an honor and privilege it is for me to be here with you tonight and talk about Project Safe Neighborhoods and the partnership between our U.S. Attorney Office and the City of Johnson City. Let me introduce to the Commission the Chief of our Criminal Division, Mr. Wayne Taylor, who is here with me. He's a resident of Johnson City and is the Chief of our Division Office in Greenville. And as a former county commissioner from the 80s and former city attorney for the city of Alcoa, I know you've got a lot on your plate, and I will try to be brief. And if I make no other point this evening, I hope you will leave with knowing how deeply we appreciate the partnership that we have with the City of Johnson City, with Chief Turner, with the Johnson City Police Department, in working together and that the funding you provide for a special assistant U.S. attorney. I'm really here to say thank you and to say we appreciate it, and it is working. By working together, we are doing the right things to make our state safer, our community safer, our schools safer, and our families safer. Mr. Peterson asked me to say a little bit about Project Safe Neighborhoods, which actually came about in about 2001 initially, and then through changes of administrations in Washington, D.C., the programs changed, the emphasis changed. There was talk about being smart on crime rather than being tough on crime. And when Attorney General Jeff Sessions came back into office, he wanted to reinstitute Project Safe Neighborhoods, which came about in 2001. And the reason he wanted to do that is in 2015 and 2016, our country was experiencing large increases in violent crime, the largest that we had had in a quarter of a century. The murder rate went up by 20%, the rate of rape went up by 9%, assault rate 8.4%. And so the emphasis has been, because of the nationwide data suggest these violent crime increases have been occurring in 2015 and 2016, it was time to reinstitute Project Safe Neighborhoods, and sometimes the media calls it PSN 2.0, that we are re-emphasizing the need to work together. Here in the Eastern District of Tennessee, the 2017 data is showing that violent crimes have been trending upwards, but now are leveling off. I know that you share my views that these numbers, these increases are unacceptable, and that we all want to work together to do all within our power to bring them down. As the United States Attorney, I'm committed to working in partnership with you to reverse the increases and make our neighborhoods safer places to live and work. The Attorney General has charged each United States Attorney to reinstitute Project Safe Neighborhood. It will be different in each district, but in our district, I want you to know first, I'm personally committed to the program. Secondly, partnership is at the heart of Project Safe Neighborhoods because none of us can do this alone. We all have a role to play. Federal, state, and local law enforcement has a role to play. Third, we can have the greatest impact if we target our limited resources on the most violent people and places in our community. 4, we must sustain this over time. And 5th, I will be accountable. I will be accountable for this program. We will be tracking our progress, and if we're not seeing results, we will adjust our approach. Research shows that when this program was first instituted in 2001, Project Safe Neighborhoods reduced crime in some communities by 4.1%, but in some 42%. The places with the most robust Project Safe Neighborhood programs experienced the greatest declines in crime. So I think we have good reason to refocus on Project Safe Neighborhoods, and I look forward to working in partnership with you. I want to give you just a few stats because of the importance of the SASA, the Special Assistant United States Attorney that you have in our office focusing on your needs. The current SASA, Thomas McCauley, has prosecuted 53 cases in federal court. It breaks down to 22 firearm cases, 10 drug trafficking cases, 14 involving firearms and drug trafficking, 2 child pornography, and 5 gang-related prosecutions. He's participated in our Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force. He's taught at the criminal law at Walter State, has taught Fourth Amendment at the Johnson City Police Department Post in Service, been a guest lecturer at Northeast State Community College, has participated in a state homicide investigation in regard to a murder of a pregnant young woman who was murdered in front of her toddler. That occurred in 2017. And he is part and parcel of our Project Safe Neighborhoods, partnering with Chief Turner, the Johnson City Police Department, also the entire Greenville office and the Johnson City Police Department are taking the innovative approach of partnering with the Johnson City Family Center Domestic Violence Service to engage in a cooperative effort to stem firearm violence associated with domestic abuse. The SALSA program has been in place for about 11 years. One former SALSA has gone on to become the director of the Indian Country Affairs in Washington, D.C. Another is currently a trial attorney working drug and gang cases with the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. We're proud to have Thomas McCauley in our office and the work he is doing, and we hope to continue that program. We thank you for it, and if there is ever anything our office can do, I hope you will let me know. And Mr. Peterson, it has been an honor and privilege to work with you over the years as you have made visits to the legislature. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And just, I ask for this so I could personally say how much we value having the Special Assistant U.S. Attorney in our office and our partnership with the City of Johnson City. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions for Mr. Overby?
Well, I do want to say that we appreciate your thanks. It's definitely a two-way street. We appreciate having an opportunity to have an impact on some of these violent individuals, putting them away for longer periods of time. So we'll continue to support this program and the special prosecutor. It has made a difference in this community. We appreciate your willingness to work with us and to take on this special prosecutor and utilize him to your fullest capacity.
Thank you very much for those comments.
Absolutely. Thank you for visiting with us.
Thank you. Good to see you this evening. Good luck with your agenda.
Thank you.
Next order of business is a proclamation recognizing Ms. Brenda Whitson of the Johnson City Convention and Visitors Bureau. If we could ask Brenda to come forward, please, ma'am. Good evening, Brenda.
Going to be a regular around here.
As long as it's for good stuff, that's all.
Thanks for coming tonight, especially. So I'm going to read this proclamation. Since the mayor's not here, I'm going to do it in his absence. Whereas the Northeast Tennessee Tourism Association is a nonprofit tourism promotion and agency that serves and supports Carter, Greene, Hancock, Hawkins, Johnson, Sullivan, Unicoi, and Washington County in Tennessee. And whereas the Northeast Tennessee Tourism Association honored the tourism industry's top performers for projects, events, and individuals, and whereas ranked by a panel of judges within the tourism and advertising industry associated with the Southeast Tourism Society, Pinnacle Awards were given to the top entry in each of 7 categories. And whereas Pinnacle Awards were given to Johnson City Convention and Visitors Bureau in 4 of those categories, including advertising and promotions with the Southern Dozen print ad, marketing and public relations, the Be Epic NAA Indoor Track and Field National Championships, and Trek Store, Attraction of the Year, the Tweetsie Trail, and Best New Event, U.S. Women's Disc Golf National Championship. And whereas an Individual Achievement Award was given to Brenda Whitson for Tourism Leader of the Year. Now, therefore, I, Todd Fowler, Commissioner, in place of David Tomita, Mayor of the City of Johnson City, do hereby congratulate the Johnson City Convention and Visitors Bureau, and especially Brenda Whitson, on a remarkable accomplishment and for successfully and admirably representing Johnson City on the regional stage. Thank you.
It is a great pleasure that we were recognized at the Pinnacle Awards, and those recognitions would not have even been possible without this continued support that we have from members of the City Commission, and particularly they give us new things to sell all the time, so that's very helpful. But we particularly appreciate the support that we receive from Public Works Department and from the Parks and Recreation Department. Those big awards would have never happened without that partnership. And I guess I'm just lucky and so blessed to be able to do a job that I have great passion for this city and I love. And so I know that this partnership is going to continue to be a great one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brenda, you may want to mention what's going to be downtown Saturday afternoon.
Yes, downtown, we have about 300 Miatas cars in town that got into town yesterday, and there are people here from all over the country, even Ontario. So there's going to be a short display or a disruption of driving on the street for the Miatas to be there and to be on display. So if you want to go and look at some pretty cool cars, we invite you to come into downtown Johnson City for that.
Thanks. Thank you.
Next one.
Your next order of business is a proclamation recognizing Olympic Day. Let's see.
We have with us tonight Dr. Andy Dodowich from East Tennessee State University, and you go ahead and say the name of the department. I always forget it.
Sport, exercise, recreation, and kinesiology.
And so for the past few years, they have put on a Youth Olympics, which has just been incredible at Kermit-Tipton Stadium. And I will also add that the Turkey Trot has been one of the primary sponsors to get these young people engaged in fitness activities. Last year we had, 500 or 600? Yeah, and this year, we're always going to go for 1,000, is that right? Okay.
Hopeful weather holds out.
So it's a real honor for me to present this proclamation tonight, Dr. Dodowich. Whereas for over 100 years, the Olympic movement has built a more peaceful and better world by educating young people through amateur athletics and bringing together athletes from many countries in friendly competition. And whereas the United States Olympic Committee is dedicated to coordinating and developing amateur athletic activity to foster productive working relationships among sports-related organizations. And whereas the City of Johnson City promotes and supports athletic activities involving Olympic and Paralympic sport, and whereas on June 23rd is the anniversary of the founding of the modern Olympic movement, representing the date on which the Congress of Paris approved the proposal of Pierre de Coubertin to found the modern Olympics. And whereas Olympic Day commemorates the birth of the modern Olympic Games and serves as an international effort to promote fitness and well-being in addition to the Olympic ideals of fair play, perseverance, respect, and sportsmanship. Now therefore I, Jenny L. Brock, Vice Mayor of the City of Johnson City, on behalf of the Mayor, and in conjunction with the City of Johnson City, with the United States Olympic Committee, do hereby proclaim June 23rd as Olympic Day in Johnson City, and congratulate all the volunteers and athletes participating in the Olympic Day events and activities, which will help develop strong character and healthy lifestyles for our young citizens. So congratulations, and why don't you tell us a little bit about the day, and you can appeal for volunteers if you need.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for having me. I really do appreciate it. And none of this could be possible without the Turkey Trot folks. They really are the driving force behind the funding for all of our long-term athlete development activities. And of course, ETSU and Parks and Recreation and Science Hill for their support as well. Olympic Day this year, we're actually going to be on Friday the 22nd is when we're going to be hosting in the stadium. We have a variety of track and field activities. The kids get to throw javelins, they get to run hurdles, they get to do a variety of things that they don't normally get to do, and they're all kid-friendly. So we're not trying
Plastic
to.
javelins.
They are plastic javelins. They are rubber-tipped, so everything is safe. But they get to jump and run and throw. We also have a variety of other Olympic sports beyond track and field. Soccer and wrestling and rugby, and we may even have some mountain biking out there this year. So we always have Olympians, that are present as well. And so we've got another Olympian that will be there this year. So it's a surprise. So we will, if you got to show up to see them. However, it goes from around 9 o'clock to noon. And we have a small opening ceremony, and it's free of charge. The kids come out and they can participate as they would like. It's a really fun, cool event to get kids out and moving about. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Your next order of business is a proclamation recognizing Garden Week.
So these are our athletic gardeners coming
That's
up.
right.
Yeah, right? I know some of them, so yes, they are. Hi, how are you? Hey, Nancy, how are you? Dr. Vota? Dr. Nelson? This is quite a group right here. Thank y'all for, let me slide down just a little bit. You didn't bring us a bouquet of flowers, though. Oh, you brought seed.
Seeds,
Oh,
it's even better.
wow. Well, let me get through this so we can get
Got to
them.
work for those flowers.
Well, thank y'all for coming tonight. I think I actually did this one last year as well. So we appreciate and we know what the beautification of Johnson City has meant to our citizens, and that includes beautiful gardens and just the nature that we have here is just magnificent. So thank you for all the work that you do and what you bring and continue to build and upgrade. So whereas gardening promotes a healthy lifestyle that reduces stress and teaches that rewards come from diligent efforts. And whereas gardening adds nutrition, beauty, fragrance, and splendor to our lives through the growing of herbs, vegetables, foliage, and flowers. And whereas gardeners beautify our community, enhancing quality of life for our citizens. Whereas gardeners advocate the importance of all creatures, large and small, and their roles in a balanced and productive ecology. And whereas National Garden Week encourages members of garden clubs across the country and worldwide to serve others in the communities where they reside and work. Now therefore I, Jenny L. Brock, Vice Mayor of the City of Johnson City, on behalf of our Mayor, David Tomita, of Johnson City, in conjunction with the national observance, do hereby proclaim June 3rd through 9th, National Garden Week in Johnson City, Tennessee, and urge our community to acknowledge the importance of gardening and the numerous contributions of gardeners. So I will present this to you, and if we could go down and you all introduce yourself, and who is the official spokesperson? Okay, just introduce yourself and what you're asking the community to do.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Sarah Bowers, and I am president of Shady Oaks Garden Club, and that is a locally federated garden club here in Johnson City. And Nancy Fishman's going to be telling you a little bit more about Shady Oaks when this gets to her. And we have had some wonderful events this week at Members Gardens. We've been helping each other. Some of us don't dig as well as we used to. And so we've been helping each other in our gardens this week and helping some other ladies in the community. And we really thank you for recognizing this important week. And before we leave, we've got some seeds that were specially packaged for East Tennessee planting. And if you want to plant them now is a good time, or, and this surprised me when I talked to the people at Eden Gardens, they said you could plant them this fall and they will come up in the spring. So we want to give you those.
Hello, I'm Heather Jacob, a member.
Hi, I'm Nancy Fishman, and tell you a little bit about Shady Oaks. We've been a federated garden club with the Tennessee Federation of Garden Clubs, which is a member of the National Garden Clubs Incorporated since, 1958, I think. And a lot of what we do is to help the community, beautification in the community. We do a garden tour every other year, and that garden tour is used to raise funds, which we use for our activities for the coming year, some of which includes donating money and materials, planting materials to Johnson City. We've also worked with Ardena Woods Arboretum in Jonesboro, and we do a weekly project with the Salvation Army called Flowers of Hope, where we take bouquets that, or we take flowers that have kind of reached their date of sale at grocery stores, Kroger, and mostly Kroger, I guess. And we take them apart, and we use the flowers that are good, and we put them together into little bouquets, which we take around to public places and also nursing homes, and also leave them at the Salvation Army. So that brings a little bit of joy to people who don't have a whole lot of joy in other forms. And then in between the garden tours, we do a flower show, and we will be doing a flower show in September this year, and you're all invited. It's going to be at Sycamore Shoals State Park on September 7th and 8th. And this is a recognized National Garden Club's flower show. So we do designs, we bring in horticulture, and we're all judged. And so it's a little bit of a friendly competition for our club members. We'd appreciate it if you would come to this. It's really fun, and you get to see some artistic work as well as some of the horticulture that we grow. And it's free. Yes, it is free. And I also wanted to recognize Cindy Hintz, who's at the end of the row here. Cindy is our state president this year, and it's a great honor for us to be able to say that Shady Oaks Garden Club has a member who's the state garden club, Tennessee Federation of Garden Clubs president this year. She's entering her second year of her term. So I'm going to pass this along and let everyone else introduce themselves.
I'm Ann Reed, I'm a member.
Diane Nelson, I'm a member.
May Votaw, member.
Peggy True, member.
Loretta Arbogast, member.
And Cindy Hintz, member of Shady Oaks, and as she mentioned, the president of the Tennessee Federation of Garden Clubs, part of National Garden Clubs, and their motto is a force for good. So we are also very much into conservation and those types of ideas, as well as the gardening. Thank you.
Now, let me share one thing with you. That of the commissioners up here, Commissioner Wise, I would have to say, is our expert, our resident expert in horticulture. I see him posting flowers in his yard often, and so
We're looking for new members, Joe, and we're interested in having men join us.
I need another meeting to go to.
But he always talks about his flowers by their scientific name.
Thank you. And if anybody is interested in membership, we do have a website, and it's www.shadyoaksgardenclub.org. So check us out, and we hope to see you at a meeting or at one of our events. Thank you.
Thank y'all so much. I'll give you want to take that forward? Thank you.
How are you?
Now, I think our next event is about fireworks, so I'm going to get out of the way. Is that
All right.
Yeah, you got to leave a couple for the vice mayor there. Thank you.
Don't ask me questions.
All right, at this time, if we could ask Keith Cochran with Pepsi to come forward and talk a little bit about our upcoming celebration on July the 4th. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate you having me tonight. Appreciate your time. I know it's important, and I appreciate the opportunity to come up here. Pepsi just wants to announce that we're having our 33rd annual fireworks event again this year. We're having it at the Freedom Hall grounds. We appreciate the opportunity the city allows us to use this venue for our fireworks event. We'll have daily opportunities for the family and the children to go out and have a good time. There'll be events going all day. We have entertainment starting live at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and at 8:15. Mo Pitney is our main stage entertainer this year. Let me tell you about country is his biggest hit debut. We're real excited to have him up. We will do a gold star salute to the veterans and their families. And again, we'll give away a 2018 Sonic LS to one lucky person this year, presented by Champion Chevrolet. So we appreciate again the opportunity to have the fire department, police, rescue, the transit that allows folks to be able to travel from ETSU and Wing Deer Park to come out. It's a great venue for everybody. We invite you all to come out. We invite everybody's families to come out and have a good time. And we just want to thank you again for your opportunity to allow us to have this venue. Yeah.
Mr. Cochran, thank Pepsi for what you do for this community. The thousands of people who get to enjoy these fireworks, whether they're at Freedom Hall, which is a great place, there's lots going on to come up. And actually, you can get out. Traffic's not all that bad leaving at night.
Not as bad as everybody thinks.
But the thousands in the surrounding area, and it's one of the best fireworks demonstrations, and just the whole program, you know, saluting our veterans is a great service to the community. So thank you all so much for everything that you do.
But thank you.
We'll be there this year.
Yes, come up, VIP, we'll get you up.
Any others? Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Your next order of business is consideration of license. The first being a consideration of a certificate of compliance for Food Lion LLC, doing business as Food Lion numbered 218. This is located at 3120 Bristol Highway. The appropriate reviews have been made, finding, finding no disqualifying factors. And this is a certificate of compliance.
So the applicant does not have to be here. We just.
That is
vote
correct.
on that. Okay, commissioners? Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Any other comment? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Next order of business is to consider a temporary occasion license for Johnson City Brewing Company to sell beer on Saturday, June 30th during the Hometown Heroes event at the mall in Johnson City. The appropriate reviews have been made, finding no disqualifying factors, and the recommendation is for approval.
If you would state your name and address.
Catherine Latham, 603 West Poplar Street, Johnson City, Tennessee, 37604.
And you've been before us many times, but I will have to ask you, have you read the rules and regulations about selling of beer in the city of Johnson City?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you agree to abide by them? Very good. Commissioners?
Move for approval. Second.
Any other comment? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes. You want to tell us about the event?
I'd love to, actually. So it's the Hometown Heroes event that the mall is hosting, and they've asked us to come out. This will be our second go-around with them, trying out some alcoholic beverages at their festival. So there's lots of stuff for kids, but the big deal is there's Michael Ray and Michael Tyler. It's a big free country concert to come out to, and they'll be celebrating both the veterans and active military and first responders at this event. There's food trucks and all kinds of fun things going on.
And I might want to just clear the record. My husband's name is Michael Ray, but he is not the performer,
Not that one.
Michael Ray. Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll probably just hang out.
Please, ma'am. Your next order of business is consideration of another temporary occasion license for Johnson City Brewing. This is for an event on Thursday, August the 23rd. It is the Pro Bono Celebration event at Tipton Haynes Historical Site. The appropriate reviews have been made, finding no disqualifying factors, and the recommendation would be for approval.
Okay, and you will have to state your name and address again, please.
Catherine Latham, 603 West Poplar Street, Johnson City.
Okay, and have you read all the rules and regulations about selling of beer in Johnson City? You agree to abide by them? Very good. Commissioners?
Move approval.
Second.
All right, any other comment? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes. You want to tell us about that event?
I'd love to. So this is actually for Legal Aid of East Tennessee. They approached us about being a part of their fundraising event, so we're excited. We'll be selling beer there, but we'll be donating $1 of every pint that's sold that night to their fundraiser, and we're excited to be there. It's live music and barbecue, and my goodness, Tipton Haynes is a beautiful place to have an event like that, so we're pretty excited to be involved. And that's kind of it for that, but if I may, I just wanted to mention one quick thing to the city. I really sincerely appreciate, it's been 2 years of remodeling to get our production facility up and running, and something that we thought would take 6 months. And the caring, compassion, and guidance that the city gave us as we were going through this process that we've never done before, we really sincerely appreciate it and feel very privileged to be in this community. Jim Sullivan, Dave McClelland, Mike Hill, they all bent over backwards to help us get to where we needed to go. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Your next order of business is to consider a temporary occasion license for the Rotary Foundation of Johnson City to sell beer on Friday, June the 8th and Friday, June the 15th during Founders After 5 events. The appropriate reviews having been made, finding no disqualifying factors, the recommendation is for approval.
State your name and address, please.
Yes, I'm Cindy Wynn, 1005 East 9th Avenue, Johnson City.
Have you read the rules and regulations about serving and selling beer in Johnson City?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've agreed to abide by them?
Yes, ma'am.
Very good. Well, this is tomorrow, right? So we've got to get this
Yes.
done. Right? Commissioners?
Move approval.
All right, any other comment? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin? Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes. You want to make any comments about what's going to be on the agenda tomorrow night for the Founders After 5?
It's the next two Friday nights, the 8th and the 15th, that, or there's several Friday Founders After 5, but Rotary is going to work on those, and we will be selling beer, sodas, water. There's live music from 5 to 8. There's some food trucks around, so it's kind of a fun night, similar to a First Friday. And then the foundation, the Rotary Foundation, will use the funds towards improvements such as our park at Rotary Park, our boundless playground, and the Rotary Station at the Tweetsie Trail. We hope to put in some picnic tables and things that citizens can use. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
This takes us to street closures. The first request coming from the Southern Cruisers Riding Club, Chapter 77, for the St. Jude's Benefit Ride to be held on Saturday, June the 30th, 2018. This is a request to close a portion of Commerce from noon until 4 p.m. on Saturday, June the 30th. The reviews have been made, and the recommendation is for your approval.
State your name and address, please.
I'm Beth Fraley, First Officer of Southern Cruisers, Chapter 77. I live 143 Slabtown Circle, Gate City, Virginia.
And this is just that small section there on Commerce Street.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Commissioners?
Move for approval.
Second.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes. You want to tell us about Southern Cruisers?
Oh, we're a nationwide and even across the pond organization. We've got about 35,000 members. Our club here's got about 86, 87 members. We, all brands of motorcycles, doesn't matter how old, what you do. We just go out and have fun. We ride to eat. And we raise money for St. Jude's.
So it's about motorcycles, riding, and eating.
Yeah,
Okay.
pretty much.
Well, you know, that's right, in St. Jude. Well, thank you so much, and
Thank you.
good luck with the
We
event.
appreciate you all letting us have this event for the past 13 years here in Johnson
Very
City.
good, thank you.
Thank you.
Your next request is from the Johnson City Public Library for their summer reading finale block party to be held on Thursday, July the 19th. This event will close the various streets from 1 p.m. until 8 p.m. The appropriate reviews have been made, and the recommendation is for approval. The map of the street closures requested is in your packet and involves King Street and Commerce Street.
State your name, and I guess your address is the library, right?
It is, yeah. Lisa Kruckelberg, 100 West Millard Street.
Okay, very good. All right, commissioners? Have a
Move
motion?
approval.
Yes.
Move approval.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. Is there any other comments, questions? Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes. Want to tell us about the event?
Absolutely. So this is the first year for us to do something like this. We saw King Commons Park being developed right in our front yard, and we're so excited to see a beautiful space for families to spend time together. And it seemed like a great venue for our summer reading finale. In the past, we've just had an early morning event, and it's been for younger age children. So it's limited our numbers. We've had to do it in-house. This will be a nice opportunity for us to do an evening event. We'll have yard games. We'll have food trucks. We're going to have a DJ there to do music because our theme this year, which just summer reading just started on Monday, is Libraries Rock. So it's all music themed. And so we're going to have a DJ, we're going to have a cakewalk, all kinds of great things going on. And, anyone is invited to join us from 6 to 8 that evening to participate. Yeah.
Great use of the park space. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your next request is from the Johnson City Downtown Merchants Association for street closures associated with the Little Chicago Downtown Music and Art Festival to be held on Friday, August the 10th and Saturday, August the 11th. The appropriate reviews have been made, and the recommendation is for approval. Just as a reminder, this is the street closures on Main Market, Roan, Buffalo, Spring, and Tipton that has traditionally been used for festivals in the streets downtown.
Commissioners, I'll get your name in a minute.
Never heard.
Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin.
Yes.
Commissioner Wise.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock.
Yes. Ms. Latham, we'll let you give you a little bit of information
Ms.
about
Catherine Latham.
about the event.
Do you need my address?
Yeah, no, that's all right on this one.
Just checking. So Little Chicago is back again for our third year in a row. We're very excited. It's pretty much kind of what happened last year. We try not to fix things that aren't broke. So you'll see great live music on 2 different stages. So we're going to have our children's performing tent up also, which has the storytelling and the many children's activities that we'll have. The petting zoo is coming back again, which I'm really excited about. So there's lots of arts and crafts to see. The local art folks will be involved, and there'll be some art competitions and other things. So we hope everybody comes out and has a good time. It is Friday and Saturday, and we will be off the streets by Sunday.
We'll wish you no rain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your next order of business is to hear a report and recommendation from the Sesquicentennial Committee. If we could ask Ms. Fulkerson to come forward to begin the festivities, please, ma'am. The rest of you don't have to be so bashful. You can support your committee member.
They don't have your back. Oh.
Wendy, okay,
comes
Laura's
Laura.
got it. Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you all for allowing us to come tonight. My name is Joy Fulkerson. It's my privilege and honor to serve among some friends and colleagues on the Sesquicentennial Commission. Since our appointment in February, the Johnson City Sesquicentennial Commission has been working diligently to plan and prepare to commemorate Johnson City's 150th anniversary. And we're happy and excited to partner with you in this very important and one-time only community milestone. As we seek to design an appropriate celebration that honors the city's history, diversity, and major institutions, we anticipate numerous Johnson City 150 themed events and activities throughout the year, leading up to the big celebration on and around December 1st, 2019. At this point in our planning, we are beginning to identify opportunities to reflect on our past and present, to discover our roots, and to honor our history and heritage. The emphasis of our celebration is on building historic awareness and recognition and pride in our community, with intention to highlight a number of integral segments of our community to include business and industry, education, faith and civic institutions, food and beverage, health and wellness, music, and recreation, it is our goal to weave the Sesquicentennial celebration into the fabric of the city with events both old and new, bringing the celebration, this special occasion, to every corner of the city and to the heart of every citizen, both young and not so young. It is the Commission's desire to engage all Johnson Cityans in this multifaceted community effort. We'll be strongly encouraging individuals, families, organizations, nonprofits, churches, businesses, friends, neighbors, anyone who loves Johnson City like we do, to join with us in recognition, commemoration, and celebration of our 150th anniversary. Again, it's my honor and privilege to serve on the Sesquicentennial Commission, and we're really ready to get to work and look forward with great excitement to the months and years ahead. We'll be happy to answer questions about the year-long celebration, but just to give you a little taste about some of the events that have already begun to take shape on our calendar or our plans. For example, we hope to partner with the Johnson City Schools and perhaps develop a lesson plan, some curriculum that could be infused throughout the schools, in really helping educate our young people about history. I was talking to some folks at work today, and Johnson City has a very unique history, and there will be ways in which we can really engage all folks. We're hoping to host some open forums and focus groups to really invite people to join with us. This is not something that the non-members of the commission can do alone or will do alone. There's an opportunity for us to connect and engage with a number of folks. The other part of the celebration and this special occasion, the milestone, is really the legacy project. We can talk about honoring our past and highlighting and illuminating what's current, but really we hope to be able to leave something to the children and grandchildren that will take this place and make it better after us. So at this point, Dr. Calhoun and Ms. Walker will come and share a little bit more about the legacy project. Thank you all.
Well, let me add, we really appreciate the support that you all have given us by putting us on the commission for celebrating the 150th year of our city. As you heard Joy say, there's really something that we want to do that's really two-pronged, if you will. And the first thing is have a celebration year. And we're working on a lot of details on that. And Joy's given you a lot of the background on how we want to include to make sure all people in Johnson City are represented. I want to transition before we talk about that, if we can answer questions about that, but let me transition to how we want to assure that not only do we have a celebration for a year, but we're remembered in years and years to come with a legacy project that people, when they see it and use it, will remember our 150th celebration in 2019. I'm going to warn you, as I talked in the past, you asked us to dream big, and we did. You want a wow project, something that will catch the eye of the citizens of Johnson City, and we feel like that we have done that with our legacy project. What we're going to show you is a multifaceted approach to accomplishing that. We're going to show you a project that we feel like takes a portion of King Commons and takes downtown Johnson City to the next level. As I mentioned, it's a three-pronged approach to attract a diverse group of people. When I say a diverse group of people, I mean people of adults, older adults, such as me. I think you all didn't like it when I pointed out it also includes some of you in this category. Children, young adults, something for everybody. The project is going to have a number of various features that Marcy's going to talk about in just a moment, but we feel all of this ties directly and perfectly with the amphitheater and the library to downtown Johnson City. Doesn't come without a price tag, and as has been reported, the price tag for our project is $3.5 million total. We have talked about a plan where we would go to the public and to our community and to our stakeholders to raise a good portion of that money. Really three-pronged approach to the fundraising. First, is we've had some preliminary discussions with some of our larger stakeholders in the community, and we feel like we can get at least $1 million from that initiative. Secondly, we plan to go to the individuals in the community and other smaller organizations and try to raise a second $1 million. So the request for the commission would be to support this legacy project to the tune of $1.5 million. Before we open it up for questions and maybe give you a little more information, I'm going to ask Marcy to come and sort of paint some pictures and show you some pictures of what this legacy project could look like when completed.
Good evening. This has so far been a lot of fun, and I just appreciate you all letting me have the privilege of serving on this commission, because we've done a lot of dreaming over the last couple months. And what I want to remind you all, and we talked about this a little bit on Monday night, is that, it wasn't too long ago, less than 10 years ago, the commission needed to address the flood issue in downtown. And we were even told so far as it was cheaper to tear everything down and just get rid of downtown as it was to do what we really wanted to do with the flooding mitigation. And we didn't. And as a result, the city this was what Founders Park looked like at the beginning. And the city did it on its own. There was no public-private partnership back at that time. It was the city saying, no, we want a downtown and we want something to be proud of. And so this is what the city started with. And as a result, that's Founders Park. And, you all know that I was gone for 3 years when I went to law school, and when I came back, the park had been built during that time period, and I was amazed at the people that are down there, not even for events, that are just down there on the weekends. And so to me, it was really exciting to see what could happen. And from that, you saw the private individuals starting to invest in our downtown. And I think that it's been very evident with the progress that our downtown has made. So when we were looking at projects, and we looked at a lot of different legacy projects, but the project that our whole commission had really landed on is in Kings Common. And what we would like to do, this is the before picture. This is what is currently the picture of Kings Common right now. What we would like to do is do a project that will have pretty much 3 parts to it. There'll be a natural adventure area, a splash pad and fountain, and actually there's 3 parts of this, will be right next to the amphitheater and right across from the library. And you can see in green is the library. The splash pad and fountain area is in orange, and the natural adventure area is the area that's in yellow, and the blue area is the amphitheater. They didn't give me a key guide to this, so, I had to kind of, wing it. Okay. The natural adventure area, and one of the things that I want to remind everybody is that, we've been dreaming, and we've been doing some preliminary work, but until we get the go-ahead from you all, I'm not going to tell you that we're going to have 4 of these and 3 of these and 2 of these. This is a concept, and there's a lot that can be done with this concept, but the commission has felt very strongly that we wanted this to be a natural adventure area. So it would be an area that wasn't just for little children. It wasn't an area that's just for young adults. It can be an area that really can span the ages of our population. So in this area, there's going to, we've talked about putting a place where you can hang hammocks so people can read. We've talked about stones that people, that children can climb on, or adults, I guess, could climb on too. But a lot of just natural materials used in this area. So this is the one component of the area. And you can see this is kind of a rendering of what this natural adventure area could look like. We've used some examples from some other towns that just show that if you're going to have swings, they use like the natural timber, that there's the stumps that children can crawl on, people can crawl on. So once again, it's very kind of health-minded. We want people to be outside and climbing and doing fun things. The other part of this project is the splash pad and fountain. We've looked at a lot of different communities that have put in fountains and splash pads and different types of features like this. And what makes this splash pad and fountain a little bit unique is that it would be synchronized to music and lights. So you can change it. You can, and this also what drives the cost too. So this was, it's more expensive. There's ways and there's companies that we haven't even started talking to yet that we feel that when we talked about the $3.5 million, we feel that that's like the top level, that we think that there's a lot of opportunities, not only to partner with companies in our region, but also to have companies do certain of this work, the design work, and not charge for it if you use that company. So we feel like there's some wiggle room in these numbers. But when you look at the splash pad area, once again, well, actually, with all of it, it will be synchronized to lights and music that can change so that you can change the music. If you're celebrating something, it can be changed. We'll be able to use the fountain, we feel like, between probably March and November. So it'll be used for most of the year. The fountains and the people that we've talked to, it can go as long as it's higher than, I think, 38 degrees. So you've got utilization of it. And once again, it's a way of bringing people downtown. I told you all on Monday night that in Anderson, South Carolina, they put in a water feature, and it's a fountain. I mean, it's a little bit different than this, but they found that it increased the foot traffic of downtown by 40%. So it's something that we're very excited about. And I think the most exciting thing to me about it is that from the people that we've talked to and from some of the major stakeholders we talked to, they really want to partner with the city. We're asking basically for like a 2-to-1 partnership here, and I just want to remind you all that when we started with downtown, there was no partnership. And I think it's so encouraging that there are businesses and companies here today that think our downtown is viable and it's something that they want to be a part of. So that's pretty much the project. Do you have any questions?
Well, as I indicated at our meeting on Monday night, I like this portion of your plan. It says a lot that we get the buy-in from the public to help support something that we wanted to see happen in this area anyway. Over the last couple of years that we've been talking about the design of King Commons, we've talked about having a splash pad feature. This can help provide that. We've talked about what the best use is of the property across the street, and one of the concepts was a playground, whether it's a natural playground or any other type of playground. Those are things, to your credit, I think will make a difference in foot traffic into downtown, and it will be something that provides for the younger members of families that right now don't have much to look forward to in our downtown. So certainly supportive of what you're doing here, and will support it with my vote. I do have a couple of questions, and it does get down to fundraising, which you have a lot of experience at. I have some experience at having fundraised for the animal shelter, and it is tough to get people to open their pockets sometimes, and in particular when you start talking about the amount of dollars that you're talking about. So the commitment, from what I understand, has been revised a little bit. The commitment that's being looked at from the city is in the $1.3 million range. You're hoping to raise roughly $2 million. Mm-hmm. If you raise $1 million, a couple of questions. Is the city's contribution still expected to be $1.3 million, or is it proportionate? You take the design costs out of that 1.3, and if you raise 50%, do we provide 50% or the balance? That's one question. The other question really centers around who prioritizes what gets built if it has to be phased, if you're not able to raise all the dollars, or if the budget gets a lot stronger than what we're anticipating at this point. I think those are things we need to clarify on the front end as we get ready to vote on our budget, of which this will be one of the things that we'll be voting on later this evening.
And what I can tell you, and I'm going to answer the second question before I answer the first question, there won't be anything that we do that the commission won't have an input on. I think that at this point, we wanted a thumbs up. We wanted to see what the buy-in of the commission was, because we didn't want to go down. I mean, literally, we've been meeting for months, and we've had really, we've had input from individuals, but not as a commission body.
We
And so-
apologize for
Well,
that.
well, no, no, and it's
We
fine.
understand the issues that can cause.
And so, but as a result, we didn't want to be going this way, and all of a sudden the commission go, oh, no, 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 we want you to go this way. So when we bring you these, like when we're bringing this to you right now, there's a lot of things that we don't have detail on. And so we don't know what the exact costs are going to be. We feel very comfortable with the companies and some of the research that we did, that it wouldn't be any more than that $3.5 million. But we also feel that there's some great possibilities that it might be less than that amount. When it comes to phasing in and doing those kind of things, I think that realistically, once we start getting in the weeds and once we start meeting with these companies, we'll have a better idea on the costs. Over the next couple months, we'll have a better idea on what kind of commitments we have from individuals and from companies in the city. And we'll keep you informed, because there will be a point when we've got to pull the trigger that we're going to look at what we've raised, what we've got, and where we're going. And so I would tell you that by you approving this amount, this $1.3 million, gives us a great thumbs up. I think that says a lot to the businesses that we're going to. I think that will be very helpful in our fundraising. And once again, I think when I even spoke with some of the companies beforehand, it was very much, we need to see what the commission is going to be willing to do, and then we need to see what kind of project that we're going to be able to do once we get the design work done. So I guess what my assurance would be to you all is that we're not going to do anything without the commission saying, yes, now we can go forward. When it comes to how much, if we only raise $1 million, I think it would be up to the commission to look at us and say, either we don't want to put the 1.3 million in, or we want to do these phases, we want to do it in these phases. I think that that's something that you all would be able to help direct us on. When it comes to the phases, right now, we don't want to look at this in phases. I'm very optimistic. I do have a lot of experience in fundraising. It doesn't always equate to the same thing, but back when we did the Children's Hospital, I didn't realize this, but we had, a company come in to, survey the community, and their report was we should only raise $15 million. I'm glad I never saw the report, because we raised $25 million. So I think we come from a very generous community. I think people are very excited and will be very excited about this project. So I'm very hopeful, and I feel very optimistic just from the few companies that we talked to, that we'll definitely be able to get to that amount. So I feel very optimistic at this point. But if we turned out that we only raised $50,000, then we'd be back at the drawing board. I just don't think that's going to be the case.
Along the lines of the question you were just asked, when you evaluate the feasibility of the private donations, are you imagining that support may be particularly interested in components of the scheme?
There's going to be naming opportunities, and I think that there will be some companies that say, gosh, I really like this component, and I want to name this, and we'll come up with naming levels, and we can do all of that. We're going to present this as a package. It's very frustrating when you kind of have this vision and then they go, oh, but this is only that's going to be done. So this is going to be a package, and if we need to, then I think everyone on the commission is willing to sit down and come up with what the reality is, and we would come back to you all. But this is something that I think everybody that you put on the commission is very excited about this. I think that everybody is very dedicated to what's happening in the downtown and really wants to see this come to fruition. So I think you've got some very committed people that are going to make this happen.
I appreciate all the time. I know what commission meetings are like, so I understand.
Me too.
Coming in and talking, and especially when you don't have a complete, this is what we need to do, it's a a lot of people with different ideas coming together. So I know how hard that was, and I really do appreciate the time and effort you've spent, and I think you've got a wonderful project, so thank you.
I'll just add, first of all, thanks to the commission. I know all the people who are on it are so invested in this, and their excitement, their passion about Johnson City, which is just great. You know, about 3 years ago, I guess Mr. Penzola brought us a plan for King Commons, and it had a number of features in it that, had we had all the money at that time, it would have just been incredible. But we always planned to, over time, to add those features that were unique things that were destinations for our citizens. And it is true, if you go downtown and dine, it's like, okay, now what do we do? So what you've provided here is really kind of two things. One, it kind of fills that, that objective that we had of adding some unique features to the park. But number two, another way to fund some of the stuff, so the city's not funding it 100%. So that's a bonus on top of that. I do believe it will help us as we just had a gentleman talk about, you know, neighborhood safety, how to make our city a more family-friendly place. And this will really check that box. So I think it will, I mean, how many have been to Vegas and stood at the Bellagio and watched the fountains, you know, play music and dance? It was just
quite
a little bit different.
different
but-
scale, just a little.
But it's a Johnson City version. But I think it's really unique, and I think it fits that location. I went by there today, commissioners, and there were 100 children from Greenville playing in that park. I couldn't believe it. The only thing, their only problem was there was no bathroom around that all the kids could go to the bathroom. So it will be that kind of, it's just a very wonderful place. It has a lot of nature to it. It's something we can really be proud of. And then we have, you know, the landmark sign there that, you know, thank goodness that we kept that. And this will be that kind of iconic feature, I think, in Johnson City, not just downtown, because I know we spend a lot of time talking about downtown, but it is for all of Johnson City. So I appreciate y'all's vision on this, and I guess we're at a point where we can figure if we make it work.
Right. And, you know, the other thing that we didn't mention, but, you know, this also dovetails very well with the library.
Yes.
And from their summer reading programs, which you all just heard about earlier, I think that this is a great way of really utilizing the space, probably to its best use.
Well, thank you all very much. Are there any other questions? Okay. So I believe we'll be reviewing the budget here in just a few minutes, and I think we'll address the request in that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time again.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Calhoun.
Dean Emeritus.
The next order of business for the commission this evening is consideration of the consent agenda.
Commissioners, would you like to pull any item on the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull, I guess, B10.
Commissioner Van Broeckman?
Thank you.
Mr. Fowler?
No, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Wise? B10.
Yeah, this relates to the Langston High School project additions and alterations, and I wonder if Mr. Peterson can just speak to kind of where we've been and where we are with relation to that project and the conversations with the lead group that are, you know, attempting to raise money and supplement that project.
Yes, sir. We actually met with them this morning, and we opened bids a week ago. The base bid came in about $2.1 million. We currently have $1.8 million budgeted for that project. They gave us an update on where they are with fundraising, and we agreed at the end of the meeting that we needed to take a couple of weeks and give them an opportunity to see what else they can do with fundraising, and to give us an opportunity to work with the architect to see if there's any additional value engineering that can be done with the project to lower some of the cost out of that project. So the bids are good for 60 days. Like I said, they've been open for a week, so we're going to take the next couple of weeks and give everybody a chance to see if we can get that number between fundraising up and cost of the project down and get to a point that the project is fully fundable.
Are you at liberty to describe what they reported relative to the current status of fundraising?
Well, they said they had been working at fundraising for several months, and that they had a number of leads that were asked that were still out that they didn't have a firm commitment on. And there are also a couple of asks that are out there that are reasonably significant that they can't get an answer to until later in the calendar year. So they were going to go back and revisit and see if they could get some sort of preliminary indication. And I indicated to them that, as long as we had assurance that a pledge of a donation was going to occur in the same fiscal year that we may incur some cost, then we could probably find a way to make that work. But that the expense and the offsetting revenue would definitely have to hit within the same fiscal year in order to keep us in good standing financially.
Is it fair to say that the gap is not covered currently?
The gap is not covered currently. That is correct, sir.
And I think it just bears repeating, the concern all along of many on the commission has been that with every month or 6 months or year that passes, the cost of construction is not going down. And so as long as we're just keeping our eye on that, because I think we want to honor the commitment to the project, but we also have a finite number of dollars, and it may be costing us $2 for the time it takes to raise $1.
Well, you've got a guaranteed price for 52 more days. So as long as we get something done in the next 50 days, we have a guaranteed price of the project. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anything else? All right, do I have a motion for approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Jennings?
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes.
Okay, your next order of business is consideration of ordinance number 4661-18, an ordinance contracting the corporate limits of Johnson City, Tennessee. A song, if you could explain the ordinance as presented, please, sir.
Good evening.
So this is a request to contract the city limits of Johnson City by de-annexing one piece of property, specifically lot number 3 of a replat of a portion of the Elmer and Rose Harrison Hess property. This is a piece of property out in Gray, the Gray annexation area. Lot number 2 was de-annexed in 2016. It's owned by the same person, and at this time what is under consideration is to de-annex lot number 3 that was kind of forgotten out at the time when this de-annexation was done. The property is currently vacant. It's a vacant lot. There's no development on it. It has not benefited from any utilities agreement with the city. At this time, it was originally outside of the urban growth area when that boundary was set in 2004, and staff is recommending that the city favorably consider this request to de-annex this piece of property.
I appreciate you bringing this to us. I know that it was entertained by the Planning Commission, and they had some concerns that our policy is not yet clearly set for de-annexation, but this is a piece of property that, in my opinion, sort of inadvertently got left out of the last de-annexation. It's a lot, as you indicated. There is no structure on it. It is owned by somebody who benefited from the de-annexation that we passed a year or so ago, a year and a half ago. It has virtually no capacity for commercial development in the future. So when Mr. Denny asked me to find out how to go about having this particular parcel de-annexed as well, I told him I would be happy to do so. I'm glad that we're moving forward on it a little bit more expediently than would occur if, in fact, we tried to work through a firm de-annexation policy. So I commend you for bringing it to us this evening and kind of taking it a little bit beyond the Planning Commission.
Want to turn that into a motion?
I do. I'd move approval, please.
Second.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Where do we stand on giving staff some guidance as to a de-annexation policy?
Staff has been doing some work in terms of the de-annexation policy. We've established a couple of criteria that we can consider in that policy, and we have analyzed how each of those criteria can affect how many properties, can potentially be de-annexed based on that those criteria that we have established. We intend to present that to the Planning Commission in the next meeting, and then hopefully if the Planning Commission gives a go-ahead, then we'll bring that in front of City Commission.
And is that a single meeting, or is that an action that requires multiple readings?
Single meeting.
Okay, so by July, staff could theoretically have a little clearer direction as to what the criteria need to be.
Yes.
Okay.
When we discussed this in 2016, I thought we had in front of us a suggested approach to de-annexation, and in fact, I thought we had approved it, which apparently we did not. I assume that what you'll come to the Planning Commission with will be very similar to that document? Okay.
Very, very, very similar. And we actually used that document, the criteria that was established in that document, in reviewing this particular request, and it would have met all the conditions.
Okay, great. Yeah, because to me, there's a couple of things that are central to it. I don't want to open up the prospect of de-annexation throughout the community. That really would not be good for the municipality. But there are a couple of things that I think you do. One of them is it has to be a forced annexation. It can't be an annexation by request, because otherwise you have property owners who request it, and then somebody buys their property, and then that person can come back to you and ask to be de-annexed. And I think that really opens up a lot of problems. I think the de-annexation certainly cannot create donut holes in the city. And I think you look at those couple of things as probably being among the very most important things that would be criteria in that document.
And those two are included in the policy.
Very good.
Well, likely, our second meeting in July, we may have the recommendation in front of us.
Yes.
Be good? Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Fowler?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin?
Yes.
Commissioner Wise?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock?
Yes. Thank you, Hassan.
Thanks,
Thank you
Hassan.
again.
Vice Mayor, if we could take about, let's say, a 5-minute recess so I can get down there and get some things set up. We'll go through the budget ordinance, and you can have presentation and consideration of the
Very
budget.
good. We'll take a 5-minute recess.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'll re-adjourn our commission meeting. We will be reviewing our budget ordinance. Mr. Peterson will be making a presentation. After all presentations are completed and a review of the amended ordinance, we will have public hearing. Mr. Peterson, you got it.
Thank you, ma'am. As you pointed out, this is first reading and public hearing of ordinance number 4660-18, which is an ordinance to establish property tax rates, appropriate funds, and adopt a budget for fiscal year July 1st, 2018 through June 30, 2019, commonly referred to as our FY19 budget. For the presentation, I'd just like to walk you through a general review of what you have spent probably well in excess of 30 or 40 hours working with staff in reviewing this budget department by department and project by project. We've, for the benefit of the community at large, we'll, if you'll bear with me, I'm going to repeat a lot of what we've spent the last month and a half covering so that the community is aware of what we're deliberating and some of the decisions that have been discussed in some of our meetings and deliberations about preparation of this budget. Highlights of this budget. This budget is built with no property tax increase needed to balance this year's budget. It is a balanced budget. Additionally, we have the good fortune of not having to increase in appropriations for health insurance out of the general fund this year. As everyone's aware, we are self-insured with our health insurance, and with the current employer and employee contributions, we have sufficient funding in place to cover the anticipated increases in healthcare costs. Janet, our healthcare fund balance right now is about $5 million, I believe is the number.
For this, yeah.
For the city. So we're in good shape with health insurance. Additionally, there is no increase in retirement cost anticipated this year. TCRS does an annual review of what the contribution needs to be into the old legacy system, and there was not found to be a need for additional funding for that system. Of course, no budget is done and put together without a number of challenges. And as we have discussed for a number of months, one of this organization's biggest challenges is employee retention and recruitment. With the unemployment rate what it is, and with the highly skilled positions that a lot of our employees must possess, it's becoming very difficult for us to recruit and retain employees. You all are very familiar with some of the turnover that we've had and some of the positions that have been very difficult to fill. So this budget really focuses on the results of many conversations with you all and a lot of work by Mr. Willis in looking at how can we best address this. And what Mr. Willis has reported back to us is that our current pay scale is about 10% below our competitors in the immediate region. So we have proposed in this budget a 4% pay plan adjustment, which would move our entire pay scale for each and every position forward by 4% to help us attract and retain the employees that we have. Also, the other challenges that we are facing in this preparation of this budget and a number of budgets going forward is the change in state shared revenues. With the elimination of the hall tax, with the rollback in the sales tax on food, this is a benefit. The sales tax on food in particular is a real benefit to those on low income, no question about it. But it Sales tax on groceries is a very significant piece of our total sales tax revenues. So any adjustment in the way that state shared funding is distributed, or any adjustment that the state makes in any sort of taxation rate impacts our revenue stream. In very general terms, the eventual elimination of the hall tax will result in the loss of about $800,000 annually to us in state shared revenues. So we are starting to see that, the impacts of those changes. We have begun planning to work through that, and we will continue to have to do that. Aging infrastructure and equipment. In a recent meeting with, as we were discussing water sewer, I think Mr. Witherspoon pointed out to you in a recent repair, we uncovered a piece of water pipe that was dated in the 1890s that is still in service in our water distribution system. Now, the good news is that pipe wasn't the one that needed repair. It was a pipe that was feeding off of that pipe. But the point being, you know, we've got streets in Johnson City that are in need of resurfacing. We've got curbs and gutters and storm drainage systems that are either antiquated, insufficient in size, and in some cases just non-existent. So that's, as we've talked about earlier with the Langston project, construction and materials prices aren't getting any cheaper. And as time goes on, some of that, and the city grows, the need for infrastructure improvement and repairs is just going to continue to grow. So we have really tried to focus the expenditures in this budget, as we traditionally do, to where they're really focused on, it's not a plan to spend money, it's a plan to reinvest into our community, to repair, replace aging infrastructure, to build facilities that will make Johnson City more attractive to outside investors, that will make our community a more welcoming place, so that when we have new employers come to town or existing employers that are trying to draw employees from outside the area, that there are quality of life issues here in Johnson City that make our community appealing, that there are things to do culturally and from an entertainment perspective, as well as continue our high quality of service. For example, our ISO rating of 1. You know, we have received numerous awards for our water and wastewater system and for our park system. Those things don't just happen. There's a lot of planning goes into that, and a big piece of that planning is the work that you have been helping us with to plan appropriate expenditures so that we make wise investments and reinvestments into our community.
Mr. Peterson, can you comment just real quickly? In 2014, we set aside, when we did that property tax increase, 13 cents out of that 25 for street repaving. So that gave us $3 million a year.
Yes, ma'am.
What value, or I don't know how to word this, how much are we getting out of that now compared to 2014? I mean, we're not able to pave as much now with that same $3 million, are we?
No, we are not. And the best answer, the most accurate answer I could give you would be whatever the inflation factor has been from that point in time till today is how much purchasing power we have lost, because we have not budgeted an increased amount on an annual basis to try to ensure that we're able to resurface the same quantity that we were at that given point in time. That is a need that we need to address. It is not addressed in this particular budget, but with, you know, probably in general terms, the inflation rate has probably been 3% a year. So we're in 2018, going into 2019, we've probably lost 10 to 12% purchasing power. Now, that's the general rate of inflation. Asphalt is predominantly petroleum. So what you'd really need to go back to get a real accurate answer would be what's the inflation rate or the price difference on petroleum products over that same time period. But that is something that, going forward, we really need to look at. How do we put more funding into our resurfacing program to at least hold ground on the amount of asphalt that we're able to put back into our resurfacing program. One of the other challenges with this budget is balanced without a tax increase, but it does require the utilization of about $1 million from our fund balance, and we'll get into a little more detail on where we are with our fund balance a little later in the presentation. Yes, sir.
For the benefit of those who may be watching from home, can you describe what contributes to fund balances going up and down? So when we're spending from the fund balance, some might think it's a finite pot of money, and if you spend $1 million out of fund balance, next year there'll be $1 million less in fund balance than there is today. How does money find its way into fund balance?
Fund balance is the same thing as a savings account in your home budget. And in our case, the fund balance grows with revenues in excess of expenditures on an annual basis. Thankfully, and I think every year for probably the last 15 years anyway, we have generated more revenue than what we budgeted. And in a lot of years, we have expended fewer dollars than what we budgeted. So in those years, that money moves over into fund balance. Now, there are other years that we budget revenues and expenditures from an operational and a transfer perspective, but there's an extraordinary one-time expense for a capital project, or there may be a year that we need, there's been a couple of years that we needed to buy a fire truck or a ladder truck, or we needed some public safety vehicles, some sort of public works equipment. It's really a one-time purchase, so we had sufficient funds in our fund balance that we could take money from our savings account or fund balance and make that one-time purchase rather than having to go borrow the money and incur the purchase price plus the interest expense. So we limit the use of our fund balance to extraordinary expenses, one-time type expenses, and we are not reliant upon our fund balance to cover operational expenses. A little more detail. The rating agencies look very closely at us when they evaluate our credit worthiness and give us a credit rating. Credit rating determines what it costs us to borrow money. A very significant part of that review is to look at our fund balance and our reserve amounts as in relationship to our operating budget, and also your historical growth and use of fund balance and what you use that money for. So we're always very careful to not become reliant on one-time money for recurring cost.
So we used the fund balance last year to balance the budget. As we approach the end of the current fiscal year, what is your sense of what might be added back to the fund balance in the current fiscal year? And I realize that
we will not be adding to fund balance this year. I'm just not sure that we're going to draw it down as far as what we budgeted.
Yeah, and I probably didn't ask that the right
That's
way.
small. Right now, we are projecting that the fund balance drawdown will be $645,000 at the close of FY18.
As compared to what was initially.
Bob, you remember what we initially budgeted?
$1 million.
Okay, we budgeted $1 million drawdown, and the actual projected drawdown is about $645,000. Yes.
We, are, for our credit ratings, you might mention too, didn't we got upgraded this year, is that correct?
We had one agency took us from a AA- to a AA. We now have a AA rating from Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch, which is, in fact, remind me tomorrow. I got if I haven't already sent it to you, I just got an email yesterday, and it's a review of all of the credit ratings of all the local governments in the state of Tennessee.
That sounds exhilarating.
Well, it's kind of interesting. The state of Tennessee has a AAA credit rating, and part of each local government's credit rating is driven by the state's credit rating. So that's very helpful to us. But there are a large number of local governments in the state of Tennessee that have either a AA or a AA- credit rating. There are very few AAA rated agencies, 6, 8, maybe beyond the state. There's not a lot of them. It's a lot to be proud of. It's not an easy thing to do to get a AA rating. In 2003-04, we had $2 million in fund balance. Just a couple of years ago, we had a little over $22 million in fund balance. Now, that doesn't mean we're awash in cash by any means. You also, or not you individually, but you as the board, have adopted a financial policy that requires us to keep 2 months operating expense as an emergency fund balance, and that's a restricted fund balance that it takes a real extraordinary event for us to be able to get into that money. And I've got a slide a little further on that'll show fund balance levels and what that restricted amount is. And anything else on that? Okay. Total budget is $247 million. That's all funds, including education, as well as the enterprise funds. Yes, you are responsible for almost $250 million budget here in Johnson City, Tennessee. This slide goes on to show what the FY18 budget amounts are and the increase that are proposed in this budget for FY19. The one I expect you to have the most questions about there would be other city funds, a reduction there of $6.4 million. What that is a combination of two things. One, golf was in an enterprise fund, and you now have it in the general fund. So part of the general fund increase is the result of the golf budget going into the general fund, and part of the other city funds decrease is the removal of that budget from other city funds. That, in conjunction with, we had some capital projects. The amount of money proposed to be expended for capital projects in FY19 is less than what we are expending in FY18. Probably the two easiest examples of where that occurred, the vast majority of the expenditures for the State of Franklin Skyline Drive intersection are occurring in FY18, but we will still incur some expense in FY19. Hopefully that project can get closed out sometime in September. So we're going to have a couple of months there, but we spent multiple millions of dollars in FY18. That's reflected in the expenditure amount you see on the sheet before you. General fund total revenues, $91 million. That's an increase of about 2.4 million or 2.7%. Those are budget to budget numbers. And I guess is just a heads up on what you're going to see. You're going to see some numbers in here that are going to be budget to budget. You're going to see some numbers in here that are going to be budget to projected. The reason we do that is, as I pointed out earlier, thankfully, a lot of times revenues exceed the original budget projections and expenditures come in less than the original budget projections. So I feel like it gives you a little more realistic look at the growth or decline in numbers if you look at budget to reality rather than budget to budget due to those variances between what we actually do versus the budgeted numbers. Your major increases, these are all revenues. You can see where the fluctuations are and what the increases are. The left-hand column is budget to budget. The right-hand column shows you what is more closely reflects what's actually happening. I guess the easiest way to look at this is that first column of percent increases is budget to budget. That's what we thought we were going to do. The last column over on the right, those percentage increases are more close to reality. So if the right-hand number is bigger than the left-hand number, that means we're moving in the right direction, that we're actually doing better than we thought we would. The only one up there that, didn't grow as much as what we had hoped is property tax. We budget to budget was 554 and budget to projected is 507. So from a revenue growth, this is a good year. We're projecting a good year, feel very solid that these are conservative, solid numbers going forward with revenues.
What would you say about the decline in property tax over budget? Just got it wrong, or?
Well, I wouldn't call it a decline. We just didn't grow as much as probably what we had looked at. Real estate development is picking back up. If you'll talk to the realtors, the time on market for properties for sale is shorter than it has been in some time. Demand is very high for residential properties. The retail and commercial properties kind of run in cycles. We had for one example would be, several years ago, you had University Edge and Monarch and the Haven out on Mountain View all kind of came online about the same time. Those were big shots in the arm to property tax revenue. The last couple of years, we really haven't had any really big multifamily developments, and there really haven't been any new 100,000, 200,000 square foot buildings that have come online, like a new shopping center or a new manufacturer or anything like that. This is still good, solid, steady growth. I don't think it's anything to be alarmed about. It's just a little different in that one column.
What accounts for the difference between the two in lieu categories?
The in lieu of at the Johnson City Power Board, we had last year's budget to this year's budget was $130,000 increase. Since the actual increase or projected to budget is only $82,500, that reflects the fact that the in lieu of payment from the Power Board last year for FY18 is bigger than what we originally budgeted. I mean, just for everybody's information, in exchange for buying Mr. Dykes' lunch today, I was able to bring down here a almost $4.2 million check for their in lieu of payment. it was coincidental. That wasn't the true reason we went to have lunch. We were covering other things, but the in lieu of payment did come in, and the in lieu of from the Power Board for FY18 was almost $4.2 million. The Iris Glen payment is the same thing. We budgeted a bigger difference than what reality is, so the in lieu of payment from Iris Glen was a little bigger than what we budgeted for in FY18. Where do the revenues come from? This pie chart pretty accurately reflects the source. As you can see, real property taxes, sales taxes are our biggest revenue sources. It hasn't been all that many years ago, probably 10 to 12 years ago. The amount of revenue from sales tax and property tax were about equal. Other local taxes, sales taxes, and personal property taxes there wasn't as wide a spread as what they are now. What that really shows me is that the percentage of sales that generate sales tax in Johnson City are definitely being impacted by outside sources, online sales. We are still experiencing sales tax growth, but it's not growing as fast as what it was prior to people shopping online. I was just reading something the other day that they're projecting a 2.5–3% growth in bricks and mortar sales, but the online sales growth was more like 6 or 8% growth they're projecting for next year. And this was a national publication looking at things across the country, but I think that's pretty reflective of the shift in the way that people are making their purchases.
Any update on congressional action?
The Supreme Court has heard the argument with North Dakota, the North Dakota suits, one that went to the Supreme Court. There were, I think, 18 states that joined in as friends to the suit. As far as I know, the court has not sent forth their ruling yet. That just went to the court May, I believe. It's not been long ago, but everything that I have seen to this point is that the court's ruling should be coming forth this summer. So we're very hopeful that the court will find in favor of the state of North Dakota, which would allow the taxation of online sales regardless of whether or not the seller had a physical presence in the state that's applying sales tax. This is a historical review of property tax revenues. I would remind you that the 2016 bar does reflect the property tax increase enacted by the Board of Commissioners, thus the big jump. As you can see, we have somewhat modest but sustainable growth, and we're in a good position with property tax revenue growth. Same thing with the sales tax revenue growth. No, we did not do a sales tax increase there, so unlike the previous slide, this is natural growth. And I think what that's really reflecting, especially when you look back at 9 and 10, that is the economy in general coming out of the recession, near depression, whatever term you'd like to use for the economic downturn experienced during the first decade of the 2000s.
What were the levels like, say, 2005 to 2006?
Janet, you remember?
Pretty healthy sales tax improvements back then. 2008 is when it really started
Slowed
tanking.
down. I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but I
Probably
would,
got some of that, some of your previous presentations over the last
So
7
we
or
can
8,
we
9
can dig
years.
it out.
I can look for it.
I would probably tie it back to something I mentioned earlier. where had the opportunity from about 2003 going forward to grow our fund balance from $2 to $22 million. I can remember vividly having a conversation with the board when Dr. Rowe was mayor, and having the conversation that history is a great predictor of the future. And while things are really booming right now and we're doing great, we don't need to spend this money. We need to put it in the bank, because the economy at some point in time is going to turn down. And the commission at that time made a conscious decision to put a lot of money in the bank. And then that grew into the down economy. We had good fund balance, and we were able to continue our service level as we had done during the good times, through a combination of pulling down fund balance and paying cash rather than laying people off, discontinuing services, or having to borrow money. Along about that same time, we were able to do a substantial amount of borrowing, in particular for some school projects and other significant capital projects, when we were paying interest rates of less than 1%, and we were buying construction materials and work for about 65 or 70 cents on the dollar. And we got a tremendous amount of community improvements done in a very affordable fashion as a direct result of low interest rates and the fact that we had a bunch of cash in the bank and we were able to keep things moving. So I would urge you to continue that philosophy that when things get good and we're able to put money in the bank, it's not because we're awash in cash. What that is planning for the future when the economic cycles produce what they historically have, and you're going to have some down times that you're going to need that cash.
I have the history on the sales tax. Between 2001 and 2002, it was up $1 million, and then it was relatively flat to 2004. Then it started increasing again at about $1 million a year until we hit the economic downturn.
And where did it peak? At what level? Was it 18, 19, 20 million?
It peaked at 18.1 million in 2008.
So it took you 4 years to come
it's
back.
not as precipitous of a drop as I was afraid that it might have been. So that's important for us to know, how much it might fall off if we have another downturn. Maybe not as precipitous as I would have imagined and would fear.
Yes.
So that's good to know.
I think we should note, too, that sales tax is so vital in funding our schools. So during that period of time, it was a tough thing on the school budgets.
Yes, ma'am.
It was
Absolutely.
basically from 2008 until 2012 just to get back to even ground.
Right.
So much growth.
General fund overall, and again, I'll remind you, this is just general fund. This is not all funds. You see the expenses broken down between personal services and operating expenditures, and the overall change budget to budget for the year. Growth, overall change of about 4.6%. Where's the money spent? And again, this is just the general fund operating expenditures. This does not include any of the other funds, and this does not include transfers. So this is just the operating expenses. You can see where the expenses occur and the percentage of the total operating budget expenditures that those departments comprise. Impacts on this budget. What were some of the bigger drivers in this budget? As we talked about earlier, the pay plan adjustment in order to get us in a more competitive position for recruitment and retention of employees, and the request for new positions in this year's budget, 7 of those being public safety positions. 4 of those 7 are at the request of the Board of Education to add 4 additional SROs into the school system. which will enable us to have a full-time dedicated school resource officer at each of our schools and multiple school resource officers up at the Liberty Bell Science Hill campus.
There'll be a total funding of 14
That would
resource
be
officers.
for total funding 14 SROs. Yes, ma'am.
14.
Yes, ma'am. Where are those positions being requested and recommended for funding? Two in the fire department are fire prevention officers, the 4 SROs, and there's an additional officer in police that goes into CID. Is that right, Carl? And then you see the other positions. As I mentioned to you earlier, a couple of these positions I want to point out and talk about a little bit. Every year we try to address making good, critical decisions on reinvestment into our community. And a big part of what drives us there are the results of our citizen survey that we do every other year. The last 2 years that we've done the citizen survey, there have been a number of and very direct responses that we need to make significant investment and continue to grow the investment into our infrastructure. Street resurfacing we've talked about. Also mentioned was drainage, additional sidewalks to make the community more walkable, quality of life issues that tie back to health and better health management within the community. So you see 2 new positions in Public Works for concrete crew. Our concrete crews do curbs, gutters, sidewalks, trails. They go back and not only build new sidewalk, they go back and repair anytime that we've got broken sidewalk or that we've had to make, a utility has had to make a repair that necessitated a cutting of a sidewalk or a curb. The Public Works guys have to go back and work that off. You've seen the results of their work in the downtown area, Founders, King Commons, all of the crosswalks that have been done downtown, the curb gutter and the brickwork that's going on in the reconstruction of the parking lot out front. That concrete crew has really been stretched thin, and with all sincere appreciation to the guys that are working for us because they do a great job, they really need some help because it's the concrete crew that can get behind a little bit, and that trickles down to other crews. So in order to stay more responsive to requests for concrete repair and new sidewalks and those types of things, we need to add a couple of folks to that crew that'll better enable us to operate multiple crews simultaneous to get the work done a little quicker. You'll also see in Public Works a half-time position in streets. In reality, what that really is, we had a long-term employee who retired, and as a result of that retirement, Andy Best moved from our stormwater director over into the assistant public works director's position. So what we have done, we had another long-term employee that was a supervisor that retired. We have taken the combination of the stormwater position and that vacant position, and we've made an operations manager position in Public Works that will be responsible for stormwater as well as responsibilities in street. As a result of that, half of that salary will be funded out of the general fund street department budget, which is a component of Public Works. The other half of that position will be funded out of the stormwater fund. So it's a better utilization of dollars and manpower, and thanks to Phil and Andy for looking through that and trying to reorganize and restructure to get more out of less funded positions. Information technology, we've had several discussions about all of the new technology we have in place now with with the new work order system through Cartograph and the new software system that Codes is utilizing, to where everyone's issued an iPad and we're doing inspections and reporting in the field. All the police officers have PDAs. We've got iPads in the fire trucks. We've got, I don't know, a couple of hundred mobile communications or cell phones, whatever you want to call them. And we just don't have the staff in-house to maintain all of that hardware adequately. And as a result of all of these new pieces of hardware, where we're out there collecting these data points, the amount of data that we're having to manage, manipulate, and store has grown exponentially in-house. So we need another position to help us with hardware maintenance as well as data management in-house. You all have seen some of the things that we've been able to do with some of this new software. Probably a good example would be in water sewer, to where we are identifying the exact location of valves and manholes and very small items of our physical plant. And tagged with that, we can record the maintenance schedule and the timing of the maintenance and the cost of the maintenance. Or if you can imagine, you've got a water line break in the middle of the night and you may have to valve off a section of line, and it takes 3 valves to dry up a section line you need to work on. Well, if you don't have a good, readily available mobile record of the location of those valves, those guys may be out there for a long period of time trying to locate the right valves. So there's real value in collecting all this data, but there is a price to collecting and maintaining that data. So you see a list of all the positions there that are additional positions in the general fund. We also have some increases in expenditures for other agencies. The public library has asked for an increase of 31.2. This is to cover operational expenses as well as a salary increase for their employees. The quasi-governmental agencies have a total increase request of $259,000, broken down as you see on the chart before you. I will remind you that we have an agreement with the Conventions and Visitors Bureau that the original 5% hotel motel tax is divided equally between the general fund and the Conventions and Visitors Bureau based on the latest available audited numbers. So how we arrived at the amount of the increase was to look at last year's appropriation or collections, I should say, and comparing that with the audited FY17 numbers, which is the latest audited number. And then you just do the math and figure out what the amount of the increase is. That way we can accurately record and track the actual audited growth in that fund each year.
Mr. Peterson, it seems like I recall the library was asking for some help with some security issues. Did all that get worked out, or maybe you know a little more about it?
It did not. Well, I won't say, I don't know whether it all got worked out. There is nothing budgeted in this budget for additional personnel for security at the library. And I'm going to turn to Chief. Chief, you got any kind of update on additional security at the library?
We've communicated with the library, and what they've done is they have altered their schedule when they hire the off-duty officers that come out for security. So we're not covering it as many days as we have in the past, but we're still at the library with officers working off duty there.
I just recall I thought they needed more, so I didn't know what had happened with that.
We're still providing security there through off-duty officers, but just not the number of days that we did in the past.
To the Vice Mayor's point, the request was to have a full-time presence there. I know it did not make it into the budget. There was some conversation that there might be able to be something worked out, as I believe, with Washington County, with the Sheriff's Department. I don't know where that stands either. But I understand it's not in the budget this year. I understand it's probably not going to make it to the budget, but the library is going to come back with a similar request again until some of the security issues over there are attended to. So if there is no way to put it into this budget, and based upon the discussions that we've had to this point, I don't see how we do that this fiscal year. We really need to have this be a focus of conversation over the course of this year, this fiscal year, and come up with a strategy about how we provide that level of security in our next budget. They're having tremendous problems. The aggressiveness of the people who come into the library, who cause a commotion, is increasing over time. It is asking a lot of people who are librarians, professional librarians, to try to control the situation when we don't have anybody in-house. At some point, I fear that we will have an incident over there and somebody's going to get hurt because we don't have public safety officers in the building full-time. So I really would like to see us look at this pretty seriously and try to come up with a strategy to improve presence over there. It's a crying damn shame that it has to occur. I mean, it really does. But as we know here in the city, they know at the library, it's a public space, and you can't exclude people just because you think that they're a nuisance. And you know, if they're a threat, that's one thing. If they're a nuisance, it's a whole nother thing. And we just need somehow or another to ensure that we don't go from a nuisance situation to a threat situation to an actual incident situation. And whether we like it or not, unfortunately, I think it means that we have to have a presence there much more consistently than what we currently do.
I agree. I mean, it surprises me that we're going to do less rather than more. So I hope we can take a really good look at that and see what the needs are, and you know, maybe there's some interim solutions to it.
Yeah, for it to be more, it's really going to take the city commission stepping up and making that additional commitment in dollars to allow it to be more, because as every other agency, the library has a budget that is not robust enough to take care of everything that it needs to do. So this is something that as a commission, I think we have to decide is a priority or it's not a priority, and next fiscal year, hopefully attend to it.
So noted, and we'll try to get back to you within the next 2 weeks with a solution for this fiscal year.
It would be appreciated very much by the librarians.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
The increase at 911 is operational payroll increase, and I think that includes another dispatcher and another dispatcher at 911. The EMS increase is some operational, primarily a salary increase for their employees. I think this is the third year that they have not done a salary adjustment due to expenditure increases exceeding revenues. In the last year or two, there's been occasions that the agency absorbed the increase in the health insurance cost, and in exchange for that, the employees didn't get a salary adjustment. So what they're trying to do is they've asked for a like amount from Washington County so that they can get their employees a raise that they haven't had in a couple of years.
Peterson, that was going to be my question. Have we any indication from the county whether the budget that the committee is moving to the full commission provides their share of an increase? Do you know?
Do you know? I haven't heard yet. Okay, I haven't heard, and Major hasn't heard, but I'll follow up with Mayor Eldridge in the morning and see what I can find out.
This is another area where retention is is an issue, isn't it? You know, being able to keep.
Retention is huge at EMS. You know, it's hard to find qualified people to work at EMS. And it's made even more challenging by the fact that for some folks, rather than working shift work as EMS does, and in most cases it's a 24-hour shift, a nursing position that may pay equal to or better money for just a little bit more qualifications becomes very attractive. I know, like us in the fire and the police department, it's a continual challenge to stay fully staffed, and sitting on that board, it seems like 10 months out of 12, Dan reports to us, you know, no, we're not fully staffed. We've got 2 or 3 vacancies, and not unlike us, there's months that it may be 5 or 6 vacancies. So it's very challenging. It's very difficult work. It can be very traumatic with some of the situations that they deal with. It's not the line of work that everybody's cut out for. Like a lot of positions, it's just becoming more and more challenging to get people that are qualified to work for you, and adequate pay is a big piece of being able to attract and retain people.
Mr. Peterson, the numbers that we're looking at right now, these are the numbers that were published in the paper, not the numbers that reflect some of the adjustments that the commission felt needed to be made. Is that correct?
What is before you right now is what is in the paper and is what was requested by the agencies without alteration by us.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, I mentioned to you earlier we were looking at general fund operating expenses. Well, another significant component of general fund is transfers, and you can see that list before you as to where those transfers go and what the amounts are. Now, this is just the transfer from the general fund. For example, capital facilities, we are going to spend a whole lot more than just $100,000 on facilities out of our capital budget. That's just the direct general fund cash that's going to make that transfer. There will be other funding sources in combination with that to cover the full cost. As you can see, debt service and the transfer to education are your big drivers in your transfers. And there's a little more detail in terms of a percentage basis as to where the transfers go. Capital equipment is budgeted to be in an amount of $2.9 million. These are examples of some of the more significant purchases. I guess all of this, other than the fire truck, will be cash funded. The fire truck will be done with the capital outlay note. That's a $500,000 piece of equipment. And we typically do not have enough cash to make a $500,000 expenditure on a single piece of equipment. We usually debt service or do a capital outlay note on
What
those
period of
things.
time do we usually finance that over?
7 years, Janet. Yes, and that's a 20-year piece of equipment. Okay, capital projects, as I pointed out, it's budgeted for $15 million. On the left, you see the source of funding. As I pointed out, there are multiple sources of revenue to fund those, and on the right, you see a recap of the facility projects that are included for funding in this year's budget. Some of those are underway, as I pointed out, Knob Creek Road and the Indian Ridge State of Franklin intersection are in progress, but those projects will continue into FY19. We talked a little bit earlier about fund balance history. This is a 10-year history of where your fund balance has been and where we're projecting to take it in this next year. I would point out to you that the blue line on the bottom is your restricted fund balance or rainy day fund that reflects what is the 2-month operating requirement of your fund, of your financial policy. Since we've talked about that a lot previously, I'll let it go unless you've got additional questions on fund balance. It's this fund balance some years is what sets us apart from other communities because we've got the cash on hand to address needs that arise during the course of the annual budget process. Without this fund balance, I can assure you there are a lot of things in this community that we enjoy and perhaps to some degree take for granted today that would not have occurred had we not built this fund balance up. And hopefully we can get ourselves into a position to start growing that fund balance bigger. In some of the conversations with rating agencies and in conversation with folks in the financial industry, we really need to grow our fund balance. We're being encouraged that that rainy day fund needs to be bigger than that, and that I've heard some folks even mention that our fund balance should be 25% of our general fund operating budget. So
In that kind of estimate, does that take in consideration the school system as well? They have their own fund balance, which is a lot less than this, but
I'm
because
going
some
to
of the
default
numbers
to Janet on that.
Yeah.
I mean, the school system is in our budget, but it's not a piece of the general fund.
But we include it because in our reserve.
Right.
Because in the event that everything, all operations ceased, we would have to continue to make that payment to them. So we try to include those things that if business stopped, if our revenues stopped today, we can operate everything we need to operate for 2 months, including our contribution to schools.
that's included in our fund balance then.
Which doesn't run the entirety of their expenses, it's
No.
simply our contribution.
It's 2 months' worth of our contribution, 2 months' worth of the $11 million.
Okay, a quick review of the general purpose school fund. Total school budget is $75.5 million. The transfer from the general fund this year is almost $10.9 million, which is an increase of 5% or $500,000. That $500,000 is for operating expenditures, and they're proposing to use $40,000 of that to add an additional mental health professional in the school system, which will hopefully address student achievement as well as school safety. As I pointed out earlier, they had requested 4 additional SROs, which we have funded. That salary increase for those SROs is not reflected in the transfer to schools, nor is it reflected in their operating budget. That expenditure is reflected in the police department budget because those were our police officers and that's where they are expensed.
But we are expecting a report back from the school system just on school safety in general as they're reviewing everything and I think doing an assessment through the state.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. There's as I understand it, there's a mandated review, and Dr. Wallace and various other folks in the school system are involved in that. And in addition to that, the school system is going to hire a firm or an individual to come in and do a system-specific analysis of our facilities and prepare a recommendation for the school board as to the current status of the safety provided by our facilities and to make the recommendation on some additional improvements if they find them necessary.
Capital improvements.
Yes, ma'am.
Physical facility improvements.
Well, I don't know that that's going to be limited to capital improvements only. It could involve as far along as additional staffing improvements that may be necessary. I'm really not sure how in-depth that evaluation will go.
I stated that wrong, and may include.
Okay, I just
capital
wasn't
needs.
sure. Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
okay.
Operating expenditures out of the general purpose school fund are reflected in this pie chart. This is pretty steady. This doesn't change much year to year. This is pretty reflective of what their operations consist of. This reflects the operating transfer to the general fund, from the general fund to schools. As you can see, in 16, when the property tax increase took effect, there was a big jump then. And this year, the bar reflects the $500,000 increase as well. Okay, the previous slide was the transfer from the general fund to the school operating budget. What this slide reflects is total school funding provided by the general fund, which will include debt service payments, school transportation, the transfer to schools for operating expenses. This does not include capital, does it? Okay, so this is what the general fund in totality transfers towards the operations of the school system, as well as providing transportation and the debt service on the facilities. I asked Laura about the capital piece. You noticed in one of the capital equipment sheets earlier, there are, I think, 10 school buses that have to be purchased this year. That'll be about $800,000 worth of school buses. Average typical year, we have to spend about $500,000, $400,000 to $500,000 a year to replace school buses in order to be in compliance with the state.
I think that was 6 large buses and 2 small ones.
2 or 4 small?
Or 4
4 small.
4 small ones, okay.
Yes, ma'am. The large buses, for a point of reference, are about $95,000
Yes,
apiece.
I see it here.
Yes, ma'am. Debt service fund. Your principal and interest for city debt and school debt are shown there for a combined total of $12.17 million for the annual payment this year. That requires a general fund transfer of $10.7 million. And then that transfer, the additional transfer to the debt service fund is almost $93,000 this year. And what that does is allow us to issue the capital outlay note of $500,000 that I mentioned earlier for the fire truck. And it also allows us to issue $4.9 million for capital projects during the upcoming fiscal year. So all of that is included in the budget. The blue is general obligation debt. The orange is school debt, and the other debt that you see there are going to be the other funds, which would be your utility funds and other enterprise funds that are out there. Utility funds. Well, that's probably a good place to stop. We've gotten through the general fund in review. This is probably a good place to ask if you have any comments, questions, suggested changes associated with the general fund.
This that you've presented is what was presented to the paper a number of days ago, and we've had some discussions about some things to add and some things to contract out of the budget in the meantime. Is this the time you want to discuss those, or is that going to be a presentation when you get done with this?
Let's do it about 8 slides from now.
Okay.
I can get you through the rest of the funds, and
That's fine. I just
Laura's
want-
got a slide put together that encompasses all the changes that you all
Based upon
talked
the
about.
comment you just made, I was a little confused whether you were going to present it that way or whether you wanted it now.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
that's fine.
anything else about the general fund at this point? Okay. This is an overview of solid waste. You know, I would remind you that solid waste in the city does include solid waste collection, recycling, brush collection, and leaf collection. So it's a multifaceted operation, and it's an operation that gets more expensive with time. The recycling market is up and down. Last fall, the first of this calendar year, China put some restrictions in place dealing with the volume of recyclables that they will accept in China for various reasons. And I think one of the primary one is the fact that their free enterprise system is starting to get legs, and they're consuming and more and disposing of more, and their recycle volume has grown, in combination with the fact that some of the recyclable material that they were receiving from outside the country was contaminated, not with anything bad, it was commingled with other things. So they have limited the amount of recyclable material that they will accept from the United States. That's having a pretty big impact on the recycling market throughout the world right now. That I don't think is having a big impact on us locally, but it could down the road. The other thing that is impacting solid waste is at Iris Glen, we receive a host fee for every ton of waste that goes into Iris Glen. We get $3, Phil, $3.30, about $3.30. The volumes going into Iris Glen have diminished over the last 4, 5, 6 years. You've got a new facility that's opened up in Sullivan County that's taken some business away from us. So the revenues are changing, and the revenue sources and amounts are changing. So all that's having an impact on the solid waste fund. Looking at the cash flow, you see the beginning cash balance, the revenues, a listing of the expenses. The two I will bring to your attention are the $3.5 million worth of revenues from bond proceeds. We're budgeting to issue $3.5 million. And down on the expense side, you see a capital project listed for $3.5 million. That is for the construction of a new facility to house some of our solid waste equipment and to potentially build a new recycling center, perhaps. The building that we do recycling in now is very old and very worn out. We have a large number of very expensive equipment that sits out in the weather every day, and we could prolong the life of some of that equipment if we could build a facility where we could store that indoors. So one of the bigger changes here is the budgeting to issue $3.5 million worth of bonds and to construct a facility. This is a fairly complicated slide at first glance, but it's really not. If you'll look at it in three components, the green bars, the aquamarine bars, and the true blue or purple, whatever you want to call that. I don't see colors real well anymore. What's there is the green bars show if we did not do the facility project and we left rates what they are today. As you can see, by the time we get out to 2024, our available cash balance will be down to about $300,000. And if you'll recall, right now it's a little over $2 million from a cash perspective. The green bar, aquamarine bar, if that's what it is what happens to your cash balance and your cash flow if you build the project but you don't do a rate increase And as you can see, in FY '22, we'll be in a deficit cash position in solid waste. The last bar, or the what I call the blue bar, shows building the project and also implementing a $2 a month increase in the solid waste fee. As you can see, that will put us out in 2024 in a projected cash position of about $1.4 million. Yes, it's still down from the $2+ million where we sit today, but it does give us the requisite cash flow to build the facility. The other thing that is of importance here, we have worked hard over the last couple of decades to get this fund in a position to where we can cash fund equipment. This saves us significant interest expense. Phil, we're buying trucks every 7 years, and 7, 8 years, and to replace the fleet's about $4 million. Is that about right? So you can imagine, having to issue a note or a bond issue on a 6-year cycle to do $4 million. There's going to be quite a bit of interest expense there. So in the long run, it saves us a lot of money to be able to cash fund these things, which this slide leads to further justification for the rate increase, not only to keep the fund solvent and to allow us to continue to save, to forego interest expense by paying cash for equipment. But if you'll look here, here's a history of what it actually cost us to service our residential customers here in the city. In FY '16-17, and these are actual audited numbers, it cost us $15.63 per month per household to provide solid waste collection, recycling, and brush, leaf, and yard collection service. The monthly fee today is $9 per month per household. So last year, we were losing $5.50 per household per month on residential collection. Fiscal year to date through the end of March, it's costing us $16.50 per household per month, offset by a $9 per month revenue stream. So in looking at the cost to provide the service as well as the need and the justification for the new facility to prolong the life of our equipment, we are proposing a $2 per month residential household waste charge increase. And this budget before you includes the $2 per month increase and the associated revenues and expenditures along with that increase.
Peterson, do most cities provide the garbage, recycle, the brush, leaf collection?
Most cities do not. We are very, very unique in providing leaf and brush collection. There are a number, and I'm just talking about across the state, there are a number of cities that don't provide solid waste collection. The city may have a contract with a single provider, or I know in some areas across the state, it's up to each household to contract with a service provider to come by and pick up your trash. Guess, Phil, how many cities across the state do recycling? 25, 30% of them? At most. So we've been operating a recycling program here since the 80s. It's very well received. It's very valued by a lot of our residents. I know in some past discussions during budget cycles and various times we've talked about, well, recycling cost us this. We could just do away with recycling, which usually generates a pretty good dialogue back and forth with a number of our citizenry that, no, we like recycling. We're willing to pay for it. Please keep the recycling going. It's the right thing to do.
Well, hasn't it also helped extend the life of our landfill?
It has
Because it's kept
drastically
of-
extended the life of our landfill. We talked about quality of life issues. We were recognized as the state of Tennessee's first green city. We were the first city in the state of Tennessee to offer curbside recycling. And to some folks, it's a quality of life issue. It's a service level issue. It's one of those things that contributes to the attractiveness of Johnson City as a place to live, work, and raise your family, and for new investors to come here and be a part of our community. We feel like it's a very valuable service. It's definitely warranted, and it adds a lot of value to our community.
Well, I think my point really is that we offer a premier service for $11 a month.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. It's an unequaled service, especially at that price. I can think of several communities that only pick up solid waste, and their monthly fee exceeds $11 a month.
To that end, we have a client community in Knoxville that I think there are 3 different independent providers. So it's garbage day every other day in this neighborhood, depending on who your hauler is. So there's dumpsters out all the time.
There's a lot of value to the citizens to know who they're dealing with, the consistency of service, and the fact is that you just pointed out, trash in your neighborhood only happens 1 day a week, and perhaps not 3, 4, 5 days a week. And you've got some assurance that the people that are doing it are using good, safe, reliable equipment, and it's being delivered by professionals. There are a number of solid waste providers throughout the state of Tennessee that do it with a pickup truck. Now that's in rural areas, granted that, or a 1-ton farm truck or something. So you can imagine the disruption to your neighborhood if you had 3 or 4 different carriers showing up, and gosh only knows what kind of equipment to provide that service. So there's a real value to it, and we're very proud of what we do. And as an additional plug for the solid waste guys, I probably get as many or more compliments about our solid waste staff as any other department that we've got. I've talked to a number of parents that have of young children where the guys have stopped, let the kid check out the truck, or the kid enjoys watching the garbage truck come and the guys will blow the horn or wave at them. That the guys are always consistent, and the community is very appreciative of the job that those folks do. And it's not a real easy, pleasant job some days.
They run on time, that's for sure.
If I oversleep, I can count on the solid waste truck waking me up at 6 o'clock every Wednesday morning. I love it. They are consistent. Okay, that was municipal system. Now we're going to talk about the regional system. You see the beginning cash, what our cash flow, revenues and expenses, and ending cash balance is for the year of FY19. You'll notice in here a capital equipment acquisition of $1.9 million. That is on a cash basis, and this is probably a real good example of what it looks like in those years that we buy a significant amount of solid waste equipment and the impact that it has on the cash balance. And again, demonstrates why we have such a fluctuation in the amount of our cash fund balance and why that's necessary. Questions on solid waste?
Customers do we have in the regional system?
Customers in the regional system. 11,000, and we've probably got 25,000 in the city. 24,000 in the city. All right, stormwater. and you're very familiar with the benefits of the stormwater program. Again, this shows a cash flow for the upcoming year. What you do see in there is that as far as capital projects this year, there is a bridge on Baxter Avenue between 8th and 9th or 8th and 10th, I don't remember which, that comes underneath Baxter that's in a deteriorating condition. And upstream from that, there's a little part of a neighborhood that where the creek runs through that's experiencing some flooding during high rain events. So what's projected is to replace that bridge and to also hire an engineer to design the bridge replacement on Oakland Avenue, right there where Austin Springs Road turns off of Oakland to go down Austin Springs. That will involve a bridge replacement as well as a regrading or some slope reconfiguration in Oakland Avenue right there in that immediate area. That should provide us some relief up on Brook Lane. We have a number of water issues up on Brook Lane because the bridge underneath Oakland is sized such that it's a constriction point and causes some upstream flooding from there. Immediately downstream from that Oakland Avenue bridge are a couple of properties that we recently acquired that used to flood. So those things in combination should provide some relief upstream to some flooding conditions and greatly enhance stormwater situation in that immediate area. Questions on stormwater? Okay. The picture on the left is the tank that's currently under construction up on Tannery Knob. You can see that the roof is not on in that picture, but Tom sent me a picture earlier this week. They've about got the dome or the roof of that thing framed in. That's been a fascinating project to watch. That's a $3.5–4 million project that, and I'm going to jinx it, from start to finish, they're probably going to get the actual tank construction done in 3 or 4 months. So far, these guys have really got their act together. This is a great contractor to work with. And what's really significant about that tank is it's going to increase our storage capacity by about 2 million gallons. So when we get into an event to where perhaps we've got a challenge at the water plant or at the intake, or we've got gosh forbid, a large-scale fire, a big demand on water, with having this extra capacity, it gives us the opportunity and some assurance to be able to provide water when we need to. That tank had just reached its useful life or beyond and really needed to be repaired or replaced, excuse me. And then the picture on the right, you're seeing a line replacement, which is typical of things we do all the time. This shows a cash summary comparing 18 budget to 19 budget. You see revenues and expenses. You will notice that the rate-funded capital is decreasing slightly from 18 to 19, but you'll also notice that there's a marked increase in the debt service payment required for water sewer next year. Of course, the bottom line shows that this current fiscal year was pretty much a break-even budget, and next year isn't a whole lot different than that. When you're looking at a $35 million budget and you're going to end the year within $50,000 of break-even, that's a pretty tight budget. What that slide also reflects is that we've got a significant amount of capital that we need to get capital projects and facilities that need to get going next year. Over the next 4 or 5 years, we're looking at about a $62 million capital program and delivery plan. About 18 of that is going to be water, and about a little over 44 will be sewer improvements. What this addresses is replacement of aging, starting to fail infrastructure. It addresses facilities and pipes that are beginning to show signs of failure somewhere in the future. This allows us to stay ahead of the game in terms of compliance with the regulatory agencies. Of that $62 million, almost all of it is driven by compliance with the regulators and staying ahead of any problems that we may have. We have an unbelievably solid record of compliance with our water distribution and wastewater collection systems. We've won numerous awards through the years, and that is, I think, a direct reflection of Tom and his staff and their ability to continually monitor what they do and their equipment, and to stay in touch with the regulators and with the industry standards to see what we need to do to stay in compliance. Our friends and neighbors in Knoxville are probably a great example of what can happen when you get into a failing system and the regulators come in and tell you what you have to do to fix it. I think that they are on the back end of a sewer correction plan that was mandated by the regulators that's approaching about $1 billion worth of work. And when the regulators come in, they tell you how to do it and when to do it, and that timeline's usually real short, and you've got no choice but to come in there and spend a lot of money really fast. Some of the adverse things that can happen associated with that is they can come in and put a moratorium on your system, which would prevent you from doing any system growth or sell any additional taps, which eventually trickles back to you can't issue any more building permits because you can't get water and sewer taps for your system. And you can only imagine the real cumulative impact on the growth, the perception of your city and your revenues. So Tom's folks have done a great job staying ahead of the curve, and the budget that you're being asked to approve does begin this capital delivery plan, and it will require some rate adjustments, which will be coming back to you in great detail when we bring back the ordinance to make the rate adjustments here in a couple of weeks.
Mr. Peterson, I think it's worth noting that the maintenance and the upgrade of our water sewer system comes out of ratepayer funding. So our rates have to be able to cover this. No tax dollars go into this system.
That is correct. The state of Tennessee will not allow us to transfer general fund or property tax dollars, sales tax dollars, into an enterprise fund, which are the 3 utility funds that we've talked about tonight, which are stormwater, water sewer, and solid waste. Those funds must be run as you would any business that's out there. You can only spend what you generate, or you can borrow. So yes, they are a part of our overall $247 million budget, but those particular funds are operated totally independent of all other funds.
And we pay for a lot of that through cash and then bonds.
Yes, and as you can see, over the delivery period of this capital delivery plan, 43% is debt funded and 57 will be equity funding. We do quite a bit on an annual basis. I think it's a little over $5 million in this particular budget of cash-funded capital improvements, whether it's a water line replacement or a sewer line replacement, pump station replacement, those types of things. That gets us through all of the funds in your $247 million budget. And again, for the benefit of those who have not had the opportunity to spend 40 or 50 hours with you all over the last 6 weeks, we went through a lot really quickly this evening, but I can assure everyone that we have gotten into the weed seed in our discussions over the last 6 weeks about what all the details behind this recap here this evening are. And we've talked about a tremendous amount of what ifs and where were we then, where do you think we're going to be in 5 years. You know, we've tried to answer all the questions about, well, isn't there a different way to do this, or would it be more cost effective to do this a different way? And we certainly appreciate you all taking the time away from your work, away from your families, and your dedication to the betterment of our community in working with us to make sure that all of your questions were asked and that we had adequate answers for your questions. And hopefully, we've given you the detail that you need to approve the budget as it's being recommended with amendments, Commissioner Van Brocklin, because I know we've got some amendments coming. Laura, if you could pull those up, please, ma'am. I'm going to let you do this. I really need a drink of water, and you probably understand this better than I do.
Okay.
Please, ma'am.
Okay. So everything we've gone through so far is as it was printed in the newspaper. And so there are several pieces that we need you as a board to approve and adjust to make sure that we have the funds in balance on all sides. That's the majority of the amendments, and I'll explain those. And I'll start with the general fund. Actually, this piece right here is in conjunction with this piece right here. We were asked after Monday night to go back and take a look at our budget and identify some funding for the request for the Sesquicentennial project that came across, as well as their operating budget. On Monday, the board, you decided $100,000 for operating expenses. So to cover that, what we did, we had a capital project, which was the wayfinding signage that was in the current budget ordinance, funded with general fund dollars. We have shifted that $250,000 to the Economic Development Reserve and freed up those general fund dollars. We've taken $100,000. Our proposal is to take $100,000 and put it in our general fund operating budget to take care of that portion. That makes that budget neutral, okay? That's the first part. The second part, down here below, addresses the request that they had for $1.5 million. In the current budget, we have, Mr. Peterson brought up that we have $4.9 million in a new debt issue. There is currently $1.3 million in there unallocated. A project was removed, so that money has not been identified or tagged to a particular project. So the city manager has taken that $1.3 million and set it aside and has proposed to put that toward the Sesquicentennial. Again, that is budget neutral. So we've been able to accomplish almost everything that they asked for, and that you requested us to go back and take a look at. And it doesn't affect our operating budget or anything at this point. We already had monies there. It was just moving some things around. Any questions on that piece? Okay. The rest of these are simply just to kind of balance out the rest of the funds. We had talked about in our budget discussions of the 4.9 million. Again, there was this 1.4 for some type of athletic field, additional field constructions, or improvements on some of our sites. So this is just simply getting the capital project in there and the funding source in the correct place. The last piece of the 4.9 that's not accounted for in the current ordinance, on the expenditure side, we have $500,000 in there that Mr. Peterson has identified and asked me to put in the school's capital project funds for additional monies possibly needed for the Liberty Bell project. In the solid waste fund, with that facility construction and the new debt issue, we have to account for the interest expense added back to the solid waste fund. Water sewer, that revenue is the revenue adjustment for the capital delivery plan in FY19. And in conjunction with that, or in addition to that, we have an interest adjustment on a new debt issue in the water sewer fund to add the $315,000 to get them exactly the way the debt schedule has been identified and laid out by Janet. And the last piece of the amendment that we have at this point is Ms. Valley came back and Leah said we just need to make a small adjustment on one of our expenditures in the community services line. And so that's just to kind of balance them out a little bit. And that's related to EduCare, am I correct? Okay, yeah, that's a reduction in some of the EduCare expenditures. And that's all I have right now on the budget amendment. These are changes made to what was printed in the newspaper at the end of May on first reading. Any questions?
Yeah, when we were talking about the funding for the schools, to be able to accommodate the request for additional SROs, there were some things that we talked about we needed to cut from the budget in order to accommodate that. And I don't see that in this slide.
That was included in the original, in the budget ordinance that was printed. We took $250,000. The original request for wayfinding signage was $500. We dropped that back.
And that's still staying at 250?
Yes, it is.
By coming out of Economic Development Reserve?
Yes,
is
sir.
that what I understood?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, and what else?
The third assistant city manager position was cut out.
Okay.
And that's close to $400,000 right there, just under $400,000. The other 100 was just, we removed a couple of small operating expenditures that we just took a couple of them out.
For the two people that are watching at home,
Yes.
let us be clear.
Yes.
That the third assistant city manager was not 400,000.
No, it was
the
not.
250
It was not.
and-
The 250 and that was just under 400,000. Thank you for the
Just wanna make sure
clarification.
we're being clear.
If we're gonna do that.
Did we end up cutting quasi-governmental agencies?
When we went
at
through that list,
25%?
no, we did not. When we went through the list, we were able to achieve the funding mechanism for the schools without having to do that.
Okay.
And then the discussion that we had, if you're in some of the meetings that we had with you all, there seemed to be also some concern or consideration about the funding from the county matching those funds. So at this point, they're still in there as requested.
Okay. And then one of the other items that we looked at was certain capital projects. Did those end up getting back into the budget, or did they end up getting cut?
We did not take any capital projects. The only one that we adjusted was the wayfinding signage to get to the schools.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Any other questions?
Good.
Now, on the school allocation, the 500,000 is a recurring maintenance
Yes,
of effort.
that goes toward their maintenance
in
of
the
effort,
budget of
yes.
following year. The 240 for the 4 SROs.
200 for the SROs, that's in
I mean,
our
200.
budget, yes.
And that's in the city budget.
It is.
And then 500,000 for the capital to shore up the project at Liberty Bell.
Yes.
That's to cover what we knew we were short
Right.
on the Liberty Bell project.
That is over and above the share that came from the county on
That
their
is
school
correct.
spending.
That's
So we're not really
100% city
shoring it
money.
up so much as we're,
Picking it up.
yeah, we're having to subsidize
We are
or
fulfilling the
supplement.
expenditure required to build the necessary structure. Yes, sir.
Well, I think that's, and this is an appropriate point to make the comment that we have a lot of needs in our school system, capital needs in our school system coming up. It has been suggested that we have a new elementary school that needs to be built or a current one replaced at a higher capacity. And we'll probably look at 25 million on that, maybe a little bit more even. We have additions that we need to make at a couple of our elementary schools at $5, $6, $8 million apiece in order to be able to accommodate the increasing number of students that we have in this district. So for the county to suggest that our needs are being met and that the monies provided through the 40-cent tax increase by the county by the municipal taxpayers don't really need to come back to the municipal schools is a fallacy. In fact, we have a lot of needs upcoming, and I would hope that our new commission, as it's seated in the county, will understand that we have needs and that they ought to be looking very seriously at helping provide for the needs of the municipality, since the municipal taxpayer is making a contribution, and not just simply for the non-municipal students, whose needs need to be met as well. I quite agree, and in fact spoke before the county commission about the need for those schools, but I think that any suggestion that schools don't have a need for these additional dollars coming in for capital needs is erroneous.
It's probably worth saying that's because Tennessee contemplates counties being the primary driver of education. And so when a city establishes a school system, it is not wholly separate and apart from the county school system. We're merely taking responsibility for those thousands of students. And that's why every other element of the funding is shared according to essentially student head count. The city schools have 47% of Washington County students, and the county schools have 53% of Washington County students, and that's why all the other money works that way.
Well, city residents are paying actually double taxes for their school, but, pay all the same county taxes that are distributed to the schools. And I think, Dr. Burnett here, we're going to receive a facility plan here in the next while.
Yes.
Okay, so we can really look out in the future to see what the funding needs are going to be.
That's right, we're working on that currently.
Okay. Very good.
Vice Mayor, I would remind you that you need to hold a public hearing on this ordinance before voting, please.
I will do it. I will officially open the public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak for or against the budget as presented?
Worn them all down.
Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. All right. It's done, Mr. Peterson. So I guess the rest is left up to us. This is first reading for the public. There will be 2 more readings. And so, gentlemen, do I have a motion or?
I move to pass, as we have just heard for the last couple of hours here.
Motion, is there a second?
50 hours.
Excuse me, if I could get you to,
With the-
if I could
with the
clarify with the
amendments-
amendments.
With
Thank
the
you, sir.
amendments that have been presented tonight.
Is there a second? I will second the motion. Or is there any other discussion?
Mayor, I would like to make a motion to amend the main motion, please, and that would be to remove the $100,000 for events that have been proposed by the Sesquicentennial Commission, and that $100,000 be either applied to one of the budget cuts that was made in order to accommodate the needs of the schools or placed back in fund balance at the discretion of the city manager.
Okay, we have a motion to remove $100,000 for the Sesquicentennial celebration. Is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion dies. Okay, so we have a motion and a second for the original. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Ms. Jennings?
Commissioner Fowler,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Brocklin.
Yes.
Commissioner Wise.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brock.
Yes. Okay.
Commissioners, this brings us to the close of the agenda for tonight's meeting, unless you have other items to bring forward or if there's any questions that we could answer for you.
Commissioner Wise, anything? Commissioner Van Brocklin, Commissioner Fowler,
Good.
anything going on? Yes.
This ordinance requires 2 more readings. You have a meeting, regularly scheduled meeting for June the 21st, 2 weeks from tonight. And then we will need to have a special called meeting. Previously, we had discussed the potential of having a third and final reading of this ordinance on Thursday, June the 28th at 7 a.m. We can have that special called meeting any day and time as long as it occurs more than 7 days from tomorrow. So if the 28th works good, if you'd like to do it a different day, we can certainly accommodate that. But I think in an effort to make sure that the public understands when the third and final reading was going to be, if we could set that date this evening or tomorrow sometime, that would be preferred.
I, for one, am fine with the 28th and would actually prefer to know sooner rather than later when we're going to do the third meeting.
Yes.
And the 7 a.m. really goes to help those who need to get to their respective offices and earn a living, so.
Will that work for you, Dr. Fowler?
That will work for me.
Works great for me.
Okay, and it works for me, so let's say 7 a.m.
Third and final reading of the budget ordinance on Thursday morning, June the 28th at 7 a.m.
Will that be put on the commission calendar so that it, thank you.
Yes. Please.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I will let you know that I will not be here on the 21st for second reading. I'll be at a workshop. So we'll be gone, and I think you will be gone as well, won't you, in California? So 3 of y'all are in charge.
Mayor, let me make a comment. I want to make a comment to staff about how much we appreciate all the effort that you put into developing your budgets for your respective departments, and particularly our budget staff who've spent countless hours on getting this to this point and attending to the adjustments that the commission has felt necessary. Really commend all of you.
Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I'm ready to go home.
Hearing that, I will adjourn the meeting.